All right, the time is 6:01 p.m. I'm calling to order a regular meeting of the City Council of the City of Sunset Valley, Texas for Tuesday, March 8th, 2022. Before we move on to our first agenda items, I just wanted to say thanks again to staff for supporting the council retreat last weekend. It feels like we've been together quite a bit over the last week or so. I appreciate all the council's time and all the staff time and the work that's been put into that, and looking forward to continued follow-up to that. So I have my post-retreat meeting with Karen and Tom to go over some of the next steps, and I'll be bringing that to council as a future action for us. So with that, though, we'll go right into agenda item number 2, which is citizen public communication. And if there's anybody who wishes to speak at this time and not to a specific agenda item, please step up to the podium and introduce yourself.
And okay, mic's on tonight. All right, please, my name is Dan Horgan. If you just give me a moment, try to condense my speech the best I can. And I want you to recognize how mad this may sound, okay? So I'm not trying to single anybody out in the room. But last month, February 15th, the council had talked about hate crime and PTSD. And there's a history of tension and unconscious bias that created a systemic problem of injustice from this small town, a small city council. And yes, this is from my heart and my head. I told previous council that I'd watch one pillow from take the no parking sign once installed, prior to Ernest Robles even coming to our community. Someone gave order from the Public Works back in the day to install that no parking sign that was in place in the one I remember. The one that I watched with a friend thrown in the back of one pillow's pickup truck in a property boundary dispute of 1.6. One pillow was trying to steal my property. She settled out of court to the tune of $20,000. Only after I was arrested for the destruction of private property. A no parking ordinance, and it finally passed. This was a year struggle, many years. Within days, Sue Colby and both the chief of police of Sunset Valley are placing the library in my ROE. And that is a violation of your LDC. This council has no jurisdiction over me, and you've been ignoring and denying me. The past has led to Detective Stearns arresting me for both the no parking signs and the fence. This is not a court of law. The investigation by Detective Stearns into the library after 30 days, after a month, after it fell off its post. Now, I'd sent a photo to council of Chief Carter with a CAD number associated to placing the free library behind my ROE. This is encouraging people to break the law. This favor and bias is gut-wrenching as she was placing hate mail in my mailbox. Have you grown impartial to the rule of law governing ROE, LDC? Something as no parking, so simple as it was, and I wish to grieve both Detective Stearns and Len Carter at this time. And there's something else I need you to do for me. And one is for Alfonso. Concerning the original no parking sign, there's got to be a record, as I stated. Would you please look into where it was, the one I remember in place? Okay, and then we can go from there. And then the second task I have is for Rudy Rosengarten. After 45 years of my life in Sunset Valley, having my coffee and eggs, I would have liked to have had some bacon. And I tell you now that there's a pig living in a pen off Reese Drive. Can you, Rudy, please tell the community how this could be? Or if you will be discussing that with the zoning commission. So here's to the things I have yet to accomplish in the 22 veterans per day that have fought their last fight. It's so difficult to condense this passionate speech. We need a party of strength, vision, energy, vibrance, and most of all, new blood and leadership to recognize the human condition. If it is said, and if it is written, then it is law, and let it be done. This is a direct result in doing nothing after 21 pages of an explanation to its hindrance and the 3 years of looking down upon me in the direction across the street. I've lived here for a long time, and we deserved a lot more respect than that, and so did this police department. I associate them to what my brother was doing. We're not gonna, I'd say if anybody, it's the government that needs to be reduced and defunded. Look at the mess your leader, Joe Biden, has done to this country in a matter of, oh my God. You know, man, that goes way back, 20 years. It goes way back to destroy this country.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. I will look to get an answer for my question and quest.
So council, we're going to move on to our next agenda item. We do have a time certain item at 7 p.m. tonight, so just keep that in mind as we go through. I don't think that we'll have any trouble keeping to that schedule, but we will break if we need to. And I'll remember, Matt's not here to remind me to speak into the mic as clearly as possible. So with that, we'll go to staff reports, beginning with the administration report.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. One of the items that you will begin to see as a request is a monthly budget report that was presented to Budget and Finance at their last meeting, that you will see it at the top of your first meeting. We were to talk about development process, but after this weekend's retreat, that's going to be a future agenda item. And then I'm sure everybody's seen the beautiful website launched. If you haven't, please do so. I want to assure residents that the old city website is still up. We have not gotten rid of anything. We are in the process of scrubbing things, but to bring them over to make sure everything is archived, but we have not deleted anything. All of the old documents are still there. And that is sunsetvalley.city. COVID-19 protocols. We are away from stage 5. We are back to stage 4, and new mandates and new information every day on masks and not masks. Staff is back in the office. We're back to being able to work remotely 1 day a week. For the most part, taking turns on who that is during the week. I have now engaged Chief Carter on the staff safety plan, and that, since it has transitioned to a capital improvement project, we will begin tracking that project the same as we track our other capital improvement projects, with a report to council and a budget update. Sure.
It went away, so yeah, just want to make sure that everybody could see the screen. The power of the mayor is just
technology. So I'll digress a little bit. As we go through the technology, this is still sort of our proof of concept. We are going to harden things up, finalize things up, make sure everything's in working order. So this is, we've taken baby steps and dipped into the pool, and we like where it's going. We've had positive feedback about the YouTube. Folks say they can hear, folks say they can see, so we're going to keep marching in that direction. Resident information request. We did have a resident request some reconciliation on the Chasco billing. I'm happy to know that the resident dove really deep into OpenGov and had some questions on the transactions, so that's very good. We also had a resident ask about the donation boxes in the commercial centers, and if you were here last week, you saw that they had already been picked up and were in our yard. And we did have resident information requests related to yours truly. We did turn over all information as requested. Upcoming meetings, beautification planning. Canales & Co. will present to CED tomorrow. There are some ideation boards as we talk about the banners and the poles potentially proposed along Brodie, and in the future along 290 and in other areas of the city in our commercial sectors. And we continue our spring and volunteer event planning. Arts Commission also on the 14th, Art Fest 2022. Important meeting at the end of the month on zoning. They pick up the 6405, they pick up their short-term rental discussion. Staff proposed some information. They want to see the legislative version, the red line version, so we will bring that up and hopefully have action on the 30th as related to short-term rentals. It is a registration process, and my permit now, the permit's already been created and we would be able to track it, so we're just waiting for the legislative component of that. Board of Adjustment also meets on the 23rd. They pick back up 6405 Brodie, and they will be talking about 1052 Sunflower. It's a pool in a side and rear setback. Budget and Finance will pick up the OpenGov dashboards that we've created, as well as begin the financial policy and budget review calendar. Upcoming items out of retreat was the staffing level, budget planning and development review. And I will jump into the budget report, and Susanna is available to answer any questions. I will tell you that this budget report is going to be amended a little bit. We will add a note section. We will highlight those items that are important that Budget and Finance has perhaps marked. We didn't want to touch what came out of Budget and Finance, so this is that information. So I'll open it up to any questions.
Councilmember Rosengarten.
I wanted to be said on the dais that we're going to go over budget. If you look at these numbers and you look at the percentages, anything under 75% is either a one-time charge, every 6-month charge, or a quarterly charge. Other than that, it also could be an item we're going to go over budget. So if you look on page 1 and go to code 5130, Medicare tax, employer's contribution. We budgeted $5,445. We've already spent $2,814. We only have 48% left of the budget. This is paid on a, how often, Susanna? Quarterly, or is this paid on a monthly basis? Bi-weekly basis. So we're definitely going to go over budget. If you look at code number 5150, same page, workers' compensation benefits, we're already at 40%. That's all that's left in that budget. We're going to go over budget on that. If you look at 5306, attorney fees, we allocated $50,000 for the budget. We already spent $31,000. We only have 38% left. Now, when it is a service fee, every time we talk to the attorney, every time one of us calls the attorney for questions and so on, it's costing us money, and we have to remember that. Every time that the attorneys sit in a council meeting, if they're not needed, the mayor can then ask the attorney to leave. So unless something changes, we're going to go over budget on the attorney. And I'm not going to go over more items. Oh, but there is another one I want to make sure that you guys are aware of. So I am. Page 2, 5656. Insurance liability. Nothing was budgeted. We had to spend $45,655. Next year, we want to look at this and we want to make sure there's something allocated in insurance liability.
Susanna, you want to touch on that expense?
So for the workers' comp and the insurance, the 5656 liability, those are both one-time charges. Our insurance rates went up significantly due to several workers' comp claims from last year, and then also vehicle insurance, if you notice that on here too, that also went up from several claims that we had last year. Depending on how this year goes, it might be less, it might be more. It just kind of have to play it by ear as the year goes.
Yep. So we need to keep an eye on the percentages.
For the insurance liability specifically, is that a line that we had previously budgeted for in past years, or is this because we had to go look at the history
I
a little
don't
bit?
remember it, because usually we're looking at 5-year history, and we go across and we look at what did we put in the budget previous years, and we compare actuals to what we're working on for budget. So we don't look at the budget for the last 5 years, we look at the actuals for the last 5 years, and then we take those averages and say, okay, with that information, how much do we need in this line item? And for there to be 0, it may be a new line item.
Well, and it'd be good to get a little bit more information on that one, specifically like whether we made a specific line and budgeted for it, or if it was always paid for out of budget amendments and or contingency, right? If that's, how we've handled it in the past. Because that's a significant number, and I want to make sure that we're prepared for future budget years, where we have.
Yeah.
I can answer that question actually right
great,
now.
thank you.
So that was my mistake. I accidentally put it in 5656 instead of 5655. It has been changed. It has been added to 5655. It's just not reflected in the report you may be seeing at the moment. And 5655, we are over budget, but only by $2,000.
I see. Okay, so it's a little bit of just we had an insurance line, but it was the budget this year when you adopted it. It should have been in 5656 in terms of how it was allocated. Okay.
Correct.
But if it should have been in 5655, the only dollar amount we allocated is 43,700, and we got 43,600, we're still going to be over budget.
Yes, by
Okay.
$2,000.
Okay.
Yeah. Councilmember Litchfield, and then Councilmember Carmona.
Yeah, and then where is that in the payment process? Is that something we need to make an amendment on, or is that something that the mayor will approve?
It's
Or
part
has
of
that
the-
been paid already?
It's part of the budget amendment at the very end of the meeting today.
Okay.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Yes. I think that also will be helpful where you have notes, and in that way, I can see now that, for example, in page number 2, you have 3 columns. Well, you have 4. But the 3 columns, you are talking about the money. And the second column is the budget. So if we start with 1 million, I don't know why it's negative. It's because it has to be positive. And in the first column is the money that we expend. So we will take out from 1.1 277, and the extra or residual will be 890. So,
Are you asking why it's negative?
yeah, why you have that as a negative?
It's the way that the report shows it. So it shows the budget as a credit, which usually shows as negative. And then the year-to-date actuals are also a negative as well. It's just the way that the
Okay.
report shows it, but it's not a negative number in actuality.
So perhaps I suggest that we need to have notes, and in that way, in some of them, that will be different. For example, in page number 3, in bulletproof vest, you have 0, and they spend 920. So now you have red because it's negative. So as a note, you can say that will be necessary budget adjustment.
And that's the plan. Budget and Finance requested that, and that will be on the next budget
I am
report.
watching at this moment, so I suggest that perhaps if they can do that, that will help. So since now, because I saw a lot of more than they are in the same way, and I think that will be for us, for me, I saw 30 something pages, and it's hard, but if I see more, go to budget adjustment, that will reduce the time that I need to spend with that report. But this is excellent, and this only is a quarterly, right? Because you have only October, November, and December.
Correct.
So January, February, and March, when that will be?
It'll probably be at the next Budget and Finance meeting at the end of, well, not the next one, it'll be at the end of March, or end of April. will be the one after the second quarter.
Thank you.
So is this supposed to be quarterly or monthly?
The budget report is quarterly. The financial statements are monthly.
Okay, good. And then the budget report is reviewed monthly by Budget and Finance?
It will be reviewed quarterly by Budget and Finance, but it's reviewed internally bi-weekly.
Bi-weekly.
Is that what I believe our financial policies say it should be done monthly? Is that correct? Can y'all verify that? If
I
not,
can
that may be
verify.
one of those things that Budget and
Okay.
Finance wants to address.
It's also shown on the financial report or the financial statements that they will see monthly, but it won't be in the same format.
In that same format, okay. So in a way, they are getting that report. It may not look the same.
Correct.
Okay, okay. So I do like this report. I like the ones highlighted in red. You can quickly go to it, and then once you have the notes with it, I think that'll be very good. So, very helpful.
I did want to circle back to the attorney because this is an item that we're trying to work through with Barbara. They had some accounting issues. We did not receive a bill from them for an extended period of time, and are working through being able to whittle some of that down as to what's actually due. And we didn't receive them until January, so there's several months in there that we're going to have to address. So last year it was under budget, this year over budget, and both years together would ostensibly equal, but we're going to have to go through that with her line by line.
Councilmember Litchfield?
Actually, I'd like to just repeat my last question. I got an answer and I was happy with it, but then I realized it wasn't exactly. So for like the 55656, that insurance payment, that has been made, correct?
Yes, it's a
Like the
one-time
money's
yearly
been
payment.
out the door?
It occurs
Okay.
once in October every year.
Was that done in following with our financial policies? Because that was over, like, so it's either a $45,000 overage or a $2,000 overage. Obviously, it seems like it should be, but I'm just kind of following back, like, on our previous meeting where we were talking about, like, this is the process that we will use. Was this done per our new processes, or was this a accidental violation of the policies?
This was prior to us discussing it. I don't even think Budget and Finance had seen the budget adjustment by that point.
Okay, but so when the invoice for this $45,000 came through, it got written down that it was coded as 5656, and
Yeah,
we
it was just
spent-
coded incorrectly, yes.
And we spent $45,000 against a zero budget, just on accident.
It was a fat finger, like, they're very close, so it was 5656 instead of 5655.
Okay. But this is something that is impossible to happen again in the future? Because I guess there's like two errors, right? There's somebody wrote down the wrong budget line, which is fine, but that should have got caught by the next level of checking, which is our budget has X and this is Y. And if the budget was zero, then like that would have got caught. So this got paid before this new process went into place? Is that kind of where we're at?
Yes.
Okay, but it could not happen in the future because we've built countermeasures for it?
Correct.
Technically, it could happen in the future because it was an accident. It wasn't put, like, we did not plan to put it to this line item. So
But
we
that would've got-
found it as an error because
Right.
it was an error. It was never meant to go to this line item. So we found it as an error because of doing this process and put it to the right account number.
But we would have got caught,
The budget
So basically,
the
the-
budget report would have caught it. So
Yes.
as we're
or it
doing,
would have got caught before the budget report, right? Or like where you're making the request for like the PO against the thing, where like on the left it says, this is my budgeted amount, right? Like it would have got caught way
Yes.
before it makes it to this report.
yes,
Yes.
it would have got caught before it makes it to this report. Yes.
Okay,
And this, in the process, under the financial policy, this would have been brought to the mayor, and since it's under $2,500, it would have been a discussion with the mayor on insurance came in higher, here's how much it is, and here's what we need to do and or not do.
right, which seems great. but like this seems like a big slip. So I'm glad we have better countermeasures in place now. Awesome.
Any other questions on the administration report? Thank you. That'll take us to Public Works.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I want to start off today by thanking everyone who came out it was at the end of February and helped with the Valley Creek Park when we were working on that trail section right there. Many hands made light work and really blazed an entire trail that day, so that was actually kind of awesome. And Public Works continues to go in there. We were lucky enough to meet some neighbors from Cherry Creek and secure an access agreement so we can go in there and start removing some of the debris that's been left behind. So that'll be ongoing through later this week. Over the past week, we've turned in an emergency preparedness plan for Tceq, as well as our water use survey to the Texas Water Development Board. And I'd be happy to answer any questions toward individual projects or individual things on the report if anybody has any questions.
Councilmember Johnson.
I just had one, and we had already talked about it, but I wanted to kind of like maybe have, since we have someone from Freeland Truck here as well, that the park one is small enough that it like fits inside my brain, and the report, the status report, and I noticed that one, as simple as it is not kind of like showing the reality of like where that project is, and it's kind of like a canary for me, and so I guess. If it is the canary, I probably shouldn't tell you that it's the canary, but if we could see these things updated as we go through, because to me, it's not reflective of like where that project is. And so like, I don't know how much fidelity, I don't know how much I can, trust is not the right word, but like just know that I'm getting the correct information from the rest of the reports.
Okay, so and as I explained in there, those individual pages are the ones that the engineers produce. So they only do what is applicable to what they've been working on. So Valley Creek Park in particular, they weren't there for the volunteer day or anything like that, so that wasn't there. And kind of as I mentioned is that I would really like to streamline this process, and anybody who has any ideas, because the spreadsheet, that has updated information. You click on the spreadsheet links, it goes to websites that is the current information that talks about Valley Creek Park. It'll talk about the volunteer day on there, talks about the next steps and everything. So I would much prefer to have just basically the spreadsheet and the website be the document that we use versus trying to have all these other pieces in there. And if anybody has any ideas or feedback on that, welcome to do.
Do you think those reports just, is that how like you guys communicate?
Yeah, we get some of that. And so, but yeah, we can also obviously talk on the phone and do different things like that. So like, that's definitely, I would definitely, like I said, I would love to streamline that process so we just have one actual report versus multiple reports.
Yeah. I mean, like if it's not like reflective and not really doing anyone a favor, then might as well just take that busy work out.
And the other ones are all up to date, but that one in particular, because it was a volunteer day that happened after that, yeah.
Okay.
Sylvia?
That one is more for me, because when I get the billing per week, I go, okay, 16 hours, well, what do they do that week for 16 hours? Let me go back and look. Okay, this one is more for me. If you guys don't want to see this one, that's perfectly fine, because she is updating better.
Yeah, I would much, like I said, prefer the spreadsheet and the website, and that's the update that you get.
Yeah, I have the list of projects that I am interested in, and they're kind of like across all departments, and like I trust my report, and sometimes I see these things. I'm not saying I don't want to have anything to do with all the reports that you guys have to generate, but it's like I get better information from my reports than that, so maybe we just don't put them in there.
That's fine. That sounds good. That makes it much simpler. I much prefer that.
Other feedback, council? Because what I find most useful is the spreadsheet. Honestly, that's the one that I track this to, but looking for other feedback. And this we can tailor, we can iterate on this if we want to see more or less, but I also just don't want staff duplicating work, especially if it's one place we can go to for.
Yeah, I realize I don't want to be like unilaterally making decision for all council there.
We do have a place that we are, when we met with OpenGov last week, there is a place in OpenGov that we're going to talk through some programming to get to the point where you guys can just drill down. It's a heat map on where the project is from an engineering and, you know, from a dashboard level, here's where we are with CIP spending, here's where we are with engineering at a very high level, and then be able to drill down. So we can tie her spreadsheet to that right now in OpenGov and produce that heat map pretty quickly so that that's the place you go and it ties into her sheets. But it is about ease of looking and drilling down into information.
Councilmember Rosengarten and then Councilmember Litchfield.
This is excellent spreadsheet. You've got all the headings that we would look for, all the details, the council action date, the budget source. Excellent.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Litchfield.
At the risk of walking into a quagmire, Councilmember Carmona and Carolyn, how do we feel about the Stearns lift station? Is that like moving along and solid and good?
Yeah, so that's actually an agenda item for tonight. So several of the projects that are on here, we'll be seeing some aspect of them tonight. So Stearns Lane will be an item we're looking at regarding amending the task order so that we can continue on with actual construction and bidding and moving on with that project, because it is a desperately needed project. And it was an unforeseen thing with having to do the sewer connection system starting from scratch, because nobody, not us, not TCEQ, nobody had the original stuff. So we had to kind of start from scratch from that. So that was unanticipated. But the project is, it's ready to go. If we can get past this hump, it's there. So you'll see a couple other items. The land development code item, I think I'd already mentioned at retreat, and the water quality pond, Lovegrass water quality pond. That also, the way we're going after that, we're also not just addressing one pond, we're fixing and doing some stuff to everything that's going to make it so much better and have better preventative maintenance on all of the ponds.
Yeah,
Councilmember Carmona.
I think Justin, Council Member Justin, you asked about only the lift station or all the projects?
The lift station.
Okay, I think that with the lift station, we are now, they say that they say prepare modification and submit to TCEQ. So I think that at this moment, the engineers, they made some modifications and they sent that to TCEQ, and they sent that on February 1st, and that will be taking 8 months. So they will send for bids for construction, and that construction will start they say September of this year, and from there, that will be working. In my opinion, at this moment, I didn't see the lift station, but I assume that it's working properly, because I read and they are doing cleaning, they are creating another cage as a trap for solids. So it looks like that they are working as a maintenance. And in parallel with the engineers, they have the other scope. So if they will go down, they can go to the lift station, and in that way will be much better. I think going back with Member Johnson, it's not a bad idea if you have in one area all the CIP projects. And CIP, and also you have another projects, what kind of projects? So as we are looking, this is easy for us with some specific, but they will be more, land development code, parks, etc. So it will be nice to go and to see that in that page. But I don't know if you saw that page for lift station. They have that schedule. So in that schedule, so this is how they have that. Looks like that is working okay. And at this moment, we are working in parallel with that. As long as they will do good maintenance, the lift station it will work. Yes, this is how I can see that.
Any other questions for Public Works report? On to Public Safety.
Good evening. I'll just touch on what Sylvia spoke about earlier about the RFP for enhanced building security and surveillance equipment over at Public Works. Back, I believe it was late July or early August, I presented a security survey for the city and the buildings, the city buildings. Part of that included a security policy for employees as well as some training as well. We've completed the policy and the training. We've also been able to take up all of the old fobs, the access fobs to the building, which we didn't have any really a policy or any kind of procedures for really making sure that we got them back when employees left and all that. We've been able to gather all of the fobs, and then we've made new ones. So now we're able to issue them and shut them off as employees come and go. So we're much more secure in that area right now, which employees are the first line in building security. Now we're ready to move on to the next phase, which is actually improving the facilities, getting some of the surveillance cameras and whatnot. I'm drafting an RFP now for somebody to come in and give us a proposal for how much that will cost and what they will do with that. So that will be on future CIP reports, and I'll keep you updated on how that's going.
Any questions for Public Safety? Thank you. We'll move on to the next agenda item, which is agenda number 4, council consideration of agenda items for approval on consent. And at this time, if there's any motion for consent items, Councilmember Rosengarten.
I move to approve on consent. Agenda item number 5, council meeting minutes of 2/15/22 with corrections. 3/2/22, agenda item number 6, RFQ for LDC. Number 7, the lift station inflation. Number 8, bids for a 2-part water quality pond maintenance. Number 9, adventure build at ArtFest plus 2 Saturdays.
All right. So motion to consider or to approve on consent item number 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. Would anybody like to pull one of those items before we proceed with the motion? All right. Is there a second to that?
I'll second.
All right. All right. So all those in favor of approving on consent item number 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say nay. Okay. We approved on consent. Consider an act on approval of the minutes from the February 15, 2022 regular meeting and March 2nd, 2022 called meeting with corrections as submitted by Councilmember Rosengarten. Is that correct? And you've received those corrections, staff? Yes. Consider an act on releasing a request for qualifications, RFQ, for professional services to provide revisions to the Land Development Code. Consider an act on the following items for the Stearns Lift Station project: authorization of amendment to engineering task order, and approval of the release for bids for construction. Item number 8, consider an act on approval of the release for bids for water quality pond project. And item number 9, consider an act on a recommendation from the Planning and Environmental Committee to have the adventure build at Sunset Valley Arts Fest and have it open for 2 weekends following Arts Fest during the hours of the SFC Farmers Market. All right. So, Council, we are at a point where we have our time certain item at 7 o'clock. We could proceed with a budget, or the only other item on here, which is item number 14, the budget adjustment. If we want to start discussion of that, we may not get through it in time, but I'd rather use the time than take a recess. So, if Council's okay with that and staff's okay with that, we'll move on to item number 14. Consider an act on approval of budget adjustment for number 6 for fiscal year 2022 as recommended by the Budget and Finance Committee, and we'll start with a staff overview.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. The budget adjustment you have now was approved by Budget and Finance at the last Budget and Finance meeting at the end of February. It was approved unanimously. And, sorry, I downloaded the old agenda and I don't have the budget adjustment on there. Aha, thank you, Chief. And the total is for $1,227,877.45, which may seem like a lot, but 1 million of that was from a land acquisition that was approved by council. The proposed funding is going to be $41,900.35 from general fund reserves. Transfer in from repair and replacement for $41,226.90. And then transfer from utility fund reserves for $3,018.75. And then the last one is venue tax reserves for $1,918.45.
Just to clarify, Sylvia, if you could, just an explanation of why there may be a difference between what's in open town hall and what we're reviewing here, because there's a question from Councilmember Johnson.
So open town hall points to the webpage, and on the city's webpage, there was the agenda, just the plain agenda itself, and then the agenda backup. So, it points to the actual agenda, sorry. On the city's webpage, you will see an amended, Councilmember Carmona pointed out that there were some pages missing. So we did an amendment, and to not appear like we were trying to delete anything off of the webpage, there's the agenda, there's the complete agenda with backup that posted on Saturday as part of the 72-hour notice. And then here's the amended that includes the sheets that were left off, and then we did receive some 6405 additional information, and that's there as well. So I can correct open town hall specifically, but that the agenda itself, the agenda document itself, did not change. What changed was the information included in the backup.
And just as a note on that, one of the topics that I am bringing forward as a future agenda item, and it was, the timeliness of this and getting legal review on it ahead of time, is a continuation of the discussion and to some extent about the calendar in preparation for meetings, so that, we're informed, and whether we want to consider some changes to our codes or our policies about backup and changes to backup and how those get posted and made, so we have a uniform approach to it. So that, and it's also clear to residents and council. In this case, there were changes that were made in order to include additional information that was not part of the original posting. We were within a window where for various reasons, we don't want to make changes to the public notice, and so that's where it kind of got to this bifurcated of there's going to be some additional material here, but we don't want to make changes to the public notice. But that is something that I think we don't have a clarity in terms of how we handle that, and I want to have some clarity, so that will be a future discussion topic once we have Barbara and the legal team weigh in on it. That being the case, if this is a concern, in terms of being enough time to review this, we can always discuss bringing this back unless because I want to make sure that everybody is getting the information they need and has time to review it.
I think we can roll with it. The city calendar also has the wrong, so I think there's at least the one I'm looking at still links to the old one. So I honestly do not want to hold this up for this, but
Yeah, we'll correct that.
Yeah.
Okay, we got open town hall corrected in a few clicks, and we'll get the calendar corrected.
Cool. Okay, thank you. First,
Okay,
Councilmember
yeah.
Rosengarten, and then Mayor Protem. Councilmember Rosengarten.
Susanna, 5656 shows its head once again in agenda item number 14, and it shows that there was adopted budget of 43,700. So when you make the correction to 5655 in Department 01, make sure you change it here. Thank you.
Yes, thank you for catching that.
Mayor Pro Tem?
Yeah, I was curious. I have, in addition, one observation about the funds. But when I received that information, I think it was Saturday at 6:30 p.m. was in the computer. I was expecting some copies, and when I have the copies was Monday. And when I saw the copies on Monday and I start reading, I couldn't find number 14, and only was partial number 13. So I didn't know that Matt, he was in vacation. So I sent one email to Matt with copy to the city administrator. And after she was checking, she found that number 14 only was the title, the topic, but nothing was there. Number 14. Number 13 was part of the information, but it wasn't other papers. So they sent me all of that yesterday, and I don't know if that is legal for the public, that only they are talking about the topics, or also the public needs to have the information. I don't know the legal aspect.
Yeah, so this is part of I'm hopeful that we can get some guidance from our legal department, and we also have a representation from the Knight Law Firm here. Per what I've researched, so far, there is a 72-hour requirement for the agenda, right? And that's clear in Texas law, where you have an agenda posting requirement by 72 hours. By city ordinance, we've adopted a longer time period. So we post the Thursday before a Tuesday meeting, for example. So we're well outside of that 72 hours. But once your minimum requirement is 72 hours, it does not refer. It doesn't refer to backup or materials that support the agenda. That's at the Texas legislature level. There are some cities in my research that have in their ordinance specified when backup also needs to be finalized and posted. We don't have that currently in ours, right? We just have, the material is going to be provided and it has to go through this process, but we don't have a defined date. So that's part of what I want council to consider is, do we want to put some rules around that so it's clear to the public when material has to be posted and when it changes and what changes are allowed? Because I think there's also some times when we have editorial changes that we would want the city secretary to say, yes, this is okay to make a change that's a typographical error in the backup or something like that. So that would be a future agenda item that I want council to consider. I know cities may have different processes for handling it, and perhaps our legal representation can give us some guidance in terms of this particular question. I don't think it affects our ability to handle this agenda item, since the 72 hours was posted for this agenda item. The backup was changed within that 72 hours. I would like us to be consistent with both, right? And that's my recommendation, is that we have a 72-hour minimum for backup and no changes at that point, and we just make sure that we're prepared, and if it's not ready, then it doesn't get on the agenda. But that I'll let, I know you're not prepared for this particular topic, and this is something that we want, just kind of coming out of the question.
Sure. Council members, and Veronica Rivera, Assistant City Attorney with the Knight Law Firm. That is correct. The agenda, according to state statute, you just need to post the agenda within 72 hours. You can adopt ordinances that provide any additional information. You don't have that at this time. However, that is something that it's your choice with regard to backup. There are some cities that even allow for late backup. But again, it's your choice with regard to what you would like to see. So to Councilmember Carmona, in terms of what you would like the public to see, then that needs to be in an ordinance, so that then that is what's followed by city staff and also by city legal when there's documents and contracts that need to be reviewed by a time certain date in order to make backup for the agenda.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, so we can act on this tonight. But again, if any member of council feels uncomfortable with the amount of time they've had for review, I would prefer to, table it in terms of bringing it back. However, if you feel like you've had sufficient time to review, then I would like to continue on with the discussion and possible motions. Councilmember Carmona?
Yeah, perhaps for me, it needs a little more review. if I will go inside, can we see the next page, please? Okay, so if we can zoom that. When we are doing the zoom, we are looking, then we are touching at this moment the reserves. That is the funds. We are not touching the funds from the department, within departments. So we go to reserves. And for me, it's important to analyze that because in some of them, we know that most of them, they came from general fund. But at this moment, we allocate in different areas. Here, when they say repair and replacements, utility, and venue, so they are specific funds. Utilities is by transfer. So it's something that we need to analyze. But the main point is, when we are doing budget adjustments, in reality, we want to go to the reserves or we want to analyze within departments because we have to have some steps. Now, looking the next page. More? Okay. So here, okay. I don't know if we can zoom just a little or everybody can see that. So looking that, the second, we have some columns and the description. And in the adopt budget that we had in computer equipment and software, we didn't put that in the budget. So at this moment, how we can do a budget adjustment of something that first we need to approve. And if the city council approve, because it's 42,000 or 41,000, well, why they don't go in that way? So if it's necessary, and they prove that to the city council. So in this case, a contract service specialist, that is almost one of them before land acquisition, and they say contract service specialist. But in reality, we move one person, one head of department, and he has a salary. So the $3,000, they are in the salary. So why we need to go to reserves? So I think that doesn't mean that we are not agree with the transfers, but we need to analyze a little much better that. So this is mainly my observations that I have. So we can table and try to analyze how we can do much better, because for me to approve the 41,000 for the computers, well, maybe I need to know the people at table which they need. So some of them, they are very old, obsolete, and perhaps I will be agreed, but not because they put this as a budget adjustment, I have to be agreed. First, I need to analyze, and we need to decide. That is my opinion.
Councilmember Reitz.
So part of the issue, from what I'm hearing, is that because we need to do budget adjustments kind of as they occur, like practically monthly, it seems, because there is no mechanism to move from one line item to another, the only choice is to take it out of the reserves. I don't think it's a choice, otherwise you have to take it out of a line item, and that is not by the policy, and that's not an option. Now, at the end of the year, when we did it all, usually at the end of the year, we were able to see what was left over in the department and say, okay, you know, we only need this amount from the reserves. But because we're doing it as we go along, we don't have that choice.
Well, I think we would have the choice because it's a choice to fund it from reserves, but we could also, another way you could handle a budget adjustment is adjust two line items, right? Decrement from one and add it to another. That would be a budget adjustment, another way of funding it, right? If we knew, for example, that there was going to be a budget item that was going to not require all the money that was budgeted for it, we may not know that. I think that's what
kind of the
Councilmember
problem
Carmona,
is that we don't know that,
right.
you know,
Councilmember
and
Carmona,
so
but
the safe way.
Right, but I think it also, I think Councilmember Carmona has a question about the laptop purchases specifically because
That's a different question.
Usually what we'd see is some type of, like if there was like a purchase order or something like that, or proposed purchase order, we'd see that, and then we'd see the budget adjustment if we approve they might be done on the same night. It's just that one would be a separate agenda item saying we need to purchase additional laptops. Let's analyze that. If we approve that, we can handle the budget adjustment on the same night. That's, I think, what Councilor Mayor Pro Tem was saying, is that he would like to see that presented as its own, separately, because it's a new item, a new purchase for us, right?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, Mayor, in the experience that I have, and also looking the finance policies, that we used to do is we used to request a budget, and we analyze the budget and we say, we present this budget. Now, through the year, perhaps some of them, we have to spend more money. But before we spend the money, we ask how we try to do that. No after we spend the money. So, in this case, if it's emergency, and if it's necessary to purchase the computers, needs to be one item in the city council, purchase computers. And we will discuss that, and we agree or disagree. And if they justify, why no? That's it. The other is, I suggest that we need to be careful if we start using the money from the reserves. That is.
And Councilmember Rosengart and then Councilmember Johnson, and just keep in mind, we also have our time certain, so we'll probably break up this conversation if we're still having a
Couple of
discussion.
questions. I remember discussing purchasing computers once before, so I don't know if it's budget finance, because I always hear it there also, but didn't we discuss this already?
Yes, July of 2021, we had the discussion of computers and end of life, and it was an item, and it was discussed about how they were funded and whether it was a capital expense and air conditioners competing with computers. Council sent us back and said, go look to see if a lease is less.
Correct.
And so Tyler Early with PD has been working through that, because there are some security issues that some machines are operating on Windows 7. And so the dissection of that amount is in the backup to who's getting what, et cetera, et cetera.
Also, would there be portions of this, Councilmember Carmona, that you would be willing to pass tonight? Are there, like for instance, the land acquisition? We all know that there was no budget for the land acquisition, but we did it. We knew there was reserves there. So are there other items on here that you would be willing to pass for budget adjustment number 6 tonight?
I think that the only that I think that is land acquisition, as you say, and that is true. We will agree, and everybody will discuss that. The others, maybe that was the situation, liabilities, et cetera, and the others, we don't need to touch that. This is my opinion.
You guys also just passed the ordinance codification tonight in the beginning of the meeting. The very first line item on the budget adjustment.
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you.
The land ordinance codification, you guys just passed that tonight. It was part of the items on consent.
Well, we passed the RFQ for the.
Oh, never mind, sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna say, wait.
I saw land development code and I thought that was the same thing. I'm sorry.
So council had previously approved an ordinance codification for the land development code that came in higher, which is why you see this, as well as us trying to do a better job of sending things to be codified in the code on a more consistent basis, as opposed to waiting every 5 or 6 months or even a year to send things over to the agency who codifies for us. Software, maintenance fees, et cetera. And I understand, it seems like Jay Horry's contract cost of $3,018 is a small amount and we could transfer it from a department line item, but our policy doesn't allow that. Since there's no budget created, it has to come here as a budget adjustment. And so, and land acquisition obviously was that, so.
So, Councilmember Carmona, would you be open to 3 items being passed on adjustment number 6? That's ordinance codification maintenance and contract services specialist and land acquisition.
I think that we have today 14 items that we need to discuss. It's almost 7 o'clock. I prefer to table this.
So you do not.
Unless we will pass only land acquisition. That's it.
I think we
Councilmember Johnson, you had your hand raised.
Yeah, a table would be next agenda. I think we can tackle this after, tackle
I
some part
agree.
of it.
I
Yeah.
agree.
Let's not, yeah.
Bring it back tonight yet? Got it.
We don't want to table it. We just want to talk about it after the public hearing here.
That sounds great. All right, so we're gonna pause our discussion on agenda item number 14. We're gonna resume it after we get through our time certain items, as well as the applicants that are here to present. So with that, we're going to move over to agenda item number, let me get back to my list. Number 10, which is our public hearing to consider requests for 2 special use permits at 6405 Brodie Lane. And we're going to open the public hearing at 7:03 p.m. And this one will begin with an overview from staff, and I think we're getting some distributions as well from the applicant.
Sorry, staff is doing 4 things right now, so we'll get there. Can you turn the lights on? Okay. Good evening, Mayor and Council. The item before you is a public hearing to consider 2 special use permits for 6405 Brodie. The first special use permit is to operate a restaurant within the neighborhood commercial district. That use is only allowed by special permit. That is a good thing. If something happens to the development and somebody else wants to come build a restaurant, they have to come apply for a different special permit. They cannot operate under that existing special permit. The second is to act on a request for alcohol beverage sales to be sold in the restaurant for on-premise consumption. Both of those are only allowed by special use. Both of those items were heard by the Zoning Commission. It was approved by the Zoning Commission and recommended to Council. Both of the applicants are here. If you have any questions, it was published as required in the Austin Chronicle. The Zoning Commission was heard on the 23rd. We did not receive any official notices against said special permits. And would council like any additional information?
And I think just for council clarification, the public hearing is just for the 2 special use permits?
Correct.
There are also variance requests that are being considered as part of our later agenda items.
A different agenda
so
item.
We'll make sure we will have time for both of those, and members of the resident or members of the public that wish to speak either at the public hearing or at the variance request. You'll have an opportunity to do so, but for the public hearing, we're only considering the 2 special use permits at this time. And so, council, I'd ask that you ask any questions to staff, or the applicant is here and you can address any questions to them regarding the special use permits. Like Sylvia said, this was reviewed by zoning and approved by zoning and recommended to council. So, council, any questions at this time, or we can also move to the public hearing or the opening it to the public at this point as well. Councilmember Johnson.
So I know this answer. I'm just clarifying it for myself again. The special use permit sticks with the applicant. So like
Correct.
they go to business and it's yanked. and it's-
Correct.
Okay.
Mayor Pro Tem?
City Administrator Sylvia, we met on February 1st. So we approved what? So they request something on February 1st. And later on-
It was the zoning change for neighborhood commercial.
zoning,
Yes.
zoning change. Later we met on February 15. So that was for what?
I think it was just that meeting.
We had to approve the amended map,
Zoning.
like the zoning map, where the zoning was reflected in the new
So
map.
zoning, so we met as a city council and we approved. Previously, the zoning commission, they approved also that. Later, we come back, all for these two things that we have for the special permit. So, no, yeah, zoning and the map, if I remember, they were talking about the future map for the city and the zoning for commercial. And later, now we came to a special with the restaurant and the alcohol. This is today, but last week, zoning, the Board of Adjustment, they meet and they were talking about some land, a buffer
The
zone.
landscape buffer. Mhm.
Buffer zone. I am looking here in these documents, and later in number 13, the next will be for a variance for parking and for impervious cover, right?
Correct.
So in order to have that, we are looking the survey as a base. The plate, what do they have? How many buildings, how much impervious cover they will have?
Correct, but that's not this item, that's a separate public hearing. This item is to act on what zoning commission,
Yeah, but all of them, they are together. So you have 10, 11, 12, and 13. So in 13, we will go to parking and impervious cover.
yes, under a separate item. Legislatively, you have to open this hearing, act on this item, close this item, make a vote on this item, make a determination, send this one. That one is that one has a separate path. That one is just you. So it's very clear, you can't mix apples and oranges. Right now, we're working in the apples bucket.
Well, yes and no. Because I hear all the meeting that they have with the Board of Adjustments. Not necessarily I am agree. But the discussion was about the buffer, 100 feet. So if today we will start with this, indirectly, we are agree with the 25 feet, because this that they presented.
No.
Okay, so if we are not agree, why we present that impervious cover?
So, two separate and distinct things. One is zoning that runs with the land. It's this intangible use that is being allowed. That, they have to go through the process, go through zoning commission and then back to you. So that's where we are today. Board of Adjustment tabled a buffer, a tangible item. They 25 feet. They tabled that and said, we're not ready to hear that. Mrs. Galt passed. We need additional information. The parking and the impervious cover is directly related to the buffer. It does have a relationship, but we're going to talk about that after this. The uses that are allowed, the use is separate and a part of whatever buffer, because if the use is allowed, but the buffer isn't, they've got to reconfigure their parking and do whatever. But that doesn't take away the use that is allowed on the property. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so, Mr. Mayor, so in this case, we will be only talking about 11 and 12 related to the special permit.
Correct. That's what the public hearing that we're
Okay.
on right now is just for the use of and the special use permit for the operating a restaurant within neighborhood commercial and for serving a permit to serve alcoholic beverages.
Yes, thank you, and I try to be specific, but thank you for the explanation. Thank you.
Council, other questions before we open up the public hearing to the public? All right, so at this time, we're going to open up for any members of the public that wish to speak about the special use permits for either operating a restaurant or for the permit to serve alcoholic beverages. And if you could, when you're stepping up to the podium, make sure your microphone's on by touching that and then introducing yourself. Yes, it has a red light. You're good to go. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. If we can pull up our presentation, please. Our presentation's combined, so I'm going to truncate it quite a bit for these two hearings first, and then we'll go into the other two hearings in a moment after these first two. Mayor Pro Tem, Council, Michael Whalen on behalf of the applicants, the Trubiana and Vasquez families. I'm glad it is International Women's Day since it's Didi Thai and Vasquez Tacos. Perfect for today. I'm here to discuss 4 approvals, 2 of which we're going to take up right now at 6405 Brodie Lane, the proposed Botanical Garden Cafe and Eatery. The last time I appeared before you during the zoning case for the site, I promised we would return to council for additional approvals and variances needed to deliver on this proposal. Today, we're following through on that and asking for 4 approvals that you see here. We're going to take up just 2 of them right now, for a restaurant special use and for an alcoholic beverage sales special use as allowed in the neighborhood commercial. I'll talk about parking later. As you just noticed or noted, council member, we do have a Board of Adjustment variance pending for relief from the landscaped buffer currently required from the city-owned former Galt lot, and I know, council member, you were present and heard that as well. If we can then go to the next slide. As you recall, this is a vision that has earned extensive community support. If you go to the next slide, including extensive support from families and households in the immediately surrounding area, which you will see on slide 4, the very next slide, which is our map. The applicants worked hard to earn the support over the course of several months and multiple meetings, and this map you see here is the culmination of that work with the blue properties in support. If we go to the next slide. Since our last meeting, we also learned, as you noted, Councilmember Kimona, that Ann Galt did pass away, and our condolences to the family. Soon after that, you received, an additional letter of support from her daughter, Susan Burton, whose former property abuts our site to the north. Susan wrote that this project will help uphold Betty Grubb's values and priorities in the same way that the city's parkland designation does for her late mother's former property, for Ann Galt's former property. She wrote, I think, a compelling and powerful letter. If we go to the next slide, we've also worked extensively at your request to address the concerns from our eastern neighbor, Mr. Scott Draker. As you can see here, these items include limiting our hours of operation, adopting a dark sky lighting plan, installing security fencing around the property, moving the eastern fence from our property line, moving it in 25.5 feet from the Drakers' property line at the Drakers' request, increasing the eastern fence height from 8 feet to 10 feet, adding additional trees to the eastern buffer area, and managing stormwater in a way that improves runoff from current conditions. We've also agreed to seek further input from the Drakers on the design for limiting access to the landscape buffer and on selecting from a list of tree types for the buffer. If we go to the next slide. And when we're talking about trees and buffering, this is what we mean. On the left-hand side, you can see how the fencing and trees interact to provide a visual screen, and on the right, you can see the various types of trees our team has identified as appropriate for both the area and for buffering purposes from which the Drakers can select. So finally, if you turn one last slide, here is our proposed site plan. If this looks familiar, it is. You've seen it before. You may recall that last time I was here at council, I made a somewhat outrageous statement. I showed you this site plan with the same required variances, and I said and begged you not to vote for this project if you didn't like what you saw, because this is what we would bring back to you. And now we're back with the same site plan as promised. There are only two small changes, both of which we incorporated to meet goals that you, the city, outlined. First, at zoning, council asked us to engage a traffic engineer to study the site. We have done that. We provided that study, and the traffic engineer is here today to answer any questions. We followed through on that, and based on that study, we revised the entryway to now include a raised median to improve circulation with right-in and right-out access only. It is recommended to limit access to one driveway, which is the most effective design from a traffic operations perspective. Again, our traffic engineer is here. The traffic study does not recommend a median break for driveway access, as access management is important to the Brodie Lane corridor. With only one point of access, the throat depth of the driveway has been lengthened beyond code minimum to approximately 100 feet to prevent queuing on Brodie. And second, the other modification from what you saw and what you voted on with neighborhood commercial is we have added an additional cistern, which will allow us to further improve our stormwater management. Other than those two changes, which we incorporated in order to follow through on the promises we made to the city, the site plan is the same that you saw during the zoning case. And as you'll remember, that zoning case centered on our request for neighborhood commercial, which would allow us to request special uses for restaurant and alcohol sales. You ultimately approved that zoning, allowing us to bring them forward today with a unanimous recommendation in favor from the Zoning Commission. The rest of our presentation is related to the two variances, so I think we'll hold the civil engineer, Blaine Stansbury, will be presenting on those two. Thank you all very much.
Thank you. And were there questions for the applicant, Councilmember Johnson, or you were?
Just in general.
Just in general. Oh, you have more questions in general?
Yeah, but you tell me.
Okay. Why don't you go ahead, and this is a good time for it since we just had the applicant representative. So if you have some questions, let's proceed with that, and then we'll continue on with the public hearing.
I guess I had two for the applicant possibly. And this is really actually not related to these. The way that like medium berm like kind of goes to the side. If a fire truck is going in there, which direction are they going to have to go? Seems like it would be fastest to go straight across.
It's beyond my pay grade.
Yeah,
I'm going to have our traffic engineer
Yeah.
answer, because it is wide enough. Obviously, it's wide enough. It has to be wide enough under city code, which it is.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Bob Aktarani, traffic consultant. So that median will be built as a lay-down curb or a mountable curb, so that if a fire truck was to come onto the property, they'd be able to just roll right over and get to where they need to go. So that'll be taken care of during the site plan stage.
Great, thank you. And then probably had one for Blaine as well, which is what brought up, does she have to like, say who she is first? No. What brought the extra cistern in? Can we have more information on that?
Sure. We've heard concerns of water quality and protection of the aquifer, and there's space for the cistern. It makes a lot of practical sense to add that in and improve water quality even further beyond what we were planning.
Okay, and before, I think you had a calculation before, or you were just assuming, and do we have another calculation afterwards?
I was not including the cisterns in the water quality calculations before, and so they have been revised in your backup for
cool.
today.
Thank you.
You bet.
All right. Other members of the public that wish to speak during the public hearing for the special use permits, if you please go to the podium. Council, any further questions before I close the public hearing? We'll also get a chance to ask questions as part of council agenda item number 11 as well, and 12. All All right, I'm going to close the public hearing at 7:21 p.m. And council, we're going to proceed with the first of the special use permits, so agenda item number 11, consider an act on a request for a special use permit to operate a restaurant within the neighborhood commercial district under section 150.101 of the Land Development Code at 6405 Brodie Lane. And I think staff, we've already got the same presentation in terms of information. So council, if you have additional questions specific to the permit to operate a restaurant, please ask them at this time. Councilmember Johnson.
So we have this list of, on page 6, wow, I thought I was young and had young eyes, apparently not, of provisions to address the Draker concerns. This is probably for Sylvia mostly. Where can we start applying this to these like concerns to actual steps that we're taking? Is being able to run a restaurant and sell alcoholic beverages, is that, just, are they following the rules? Is like all the paperwork filled out, or can we apply some of these conditions to those?
So one, yes, they're following the rules. You have to get to the checkbox. And I've had this conversation with folks about, at every step of the way, we have to take the Drakers into account. But we're getting to the point of having a steak meal, but we're at the point of still trying to pick the cow out, right? So at the platting stage is where we will discuss any additional exactions that need to be taken, like extra space in the back for noise or any additional, whatever the city is trying to quote unquote exact to make this property doable. The second part is the more important stuff happens during the building and permitting process. So for example, you guys asked for smell, right? We needed to address smell. So we have to address that in the HVAC component of the building permit. You guys address noise. So we will be discussing at both plat and at the building component on any acoustical stuff that may be needed to address any additional noise that will happen. We haven't gotten to the points of, again, actually carving out the steak to make the determination, but all of those check boxes need to be addressed. And so the plan is that as we go through the permitting process, and assuming we can get there successfully, because you guys will still see the plat, you're going to see the plat again, and you're going to make sure that we've checked those boxes. And when we get to the building permit, that a certificate of occupancy be issued conditioned on the 11 things you guys said you wanted to be followed in the special permit. So those are the safeguards in the entire process. There's some safeguards sprinkled in here. Most of them are in the permitting process.
Okay, so it's not the time for me, and I'm going to ask this at every step of the way. Oh, okay, yeah, so at least like the first hours of operations seems like a very clear kind of like one-to-one between like, hey, and I don't know the way
that is a condition you can ask during the special permit.
Okay, so, and then how do we get to the actual like enforcement of this stuff where we say like they're open until 11:01 and then we're not going to rush in there and just like rip the permit off their wall? I mean, there has to be.
Correct. Like code enforcement, we have to give due process. We have to give notice of violation. We have to give the opportunity to cure the violation. And then when they don't cure the violation, then it becomes the position of the council to be able to withdraw the special permit.
Okay. This is, I'll say it's an education for everyone. It's mostly an education for me on this.
No. Hours of operation is one of those, again, those intangibles. I can't control that through the building permit, but it can certainly be controlled through the special use permit.
I'll probably have more questions in a sec.
Sure.
Councilmember Reitz and then Mayor Pro Tem.
So when we go to the actual vote on this special permit for the restaurant, that would actually say we need to specify the hours in that, correct?
Correct.
Okay. The other concerns here on page 6, and yes, I need my glasses too, is what other concerns do we need to address in these 2 permits? Because it looks like a lot of those are site plan types of seems to be the only one to me.
So the applicant has, well, there's lighting, right? Obviously, lighting would have a detrimental impact, but the applicant has already agreed to abide by dark sky, and there's already some screening for commercial lighting that's required to not
With our
light
code.
pollute. Yes. So again, that's a tangible. I can see if there's light pollution. I can see if the lumens don't match when they submit, you know, for their smell, sound. Those were big ones for you guys. And screening, setback, the big space. And then not shedding any additional water. That is something we're gonna have to deal through both the plat and at construction, because I think right now the discussion is just that of an amoeba. They're not gonna shed additional water. They're not gonna exacerbate, but I think there's a discussion, and Blaine, correct me, that there's gonna be a reduction of 25% or something like that, and that may be the cisterns. I'm not sure what that discussion is, but you gotta give it some parameter of what it is. You can't just say, we're gonna reduce the amount of water.
Mayor Pro Tem, and
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Only for my understanding, legally, we can limit the operating hours for this restaurant?
yes.
I don't know, maybe legally?
Yes, you can.
Okay, so,
And I may need to remind you all that this was already at zoning, and I believe that there were conditions that were added at zoning. So just want to make sure that whatever you already put as conditions during zoning are consistent with the conditions that you place tonight. There's a possibility that you don't need to add any additional conditions because they were already addressed during zoning. So I just wanted to make sure that y'all were aware of that. But yes, you can definitely add a condition on hours.
so, thank you for that. So, for my understanding, because I have a lot of residents, then they will tell me why in front of this place, they don't close at 11 o'clock. So in front of this place, we know that we have ETJ for one business that is in front of that place, but they don't close at 11. So the questions is because this is limitations, this is our city, and this is the ordinance, this is the law, and this is why we decide. The other is the county, and the county decide at what time they will close. This is how that works?
Correct.
Thank you.
Councilmember Johnson?
So when, Wanda, when you brought that up, like, oh, we can revisit this again against the building permit or whatever the site plan or whatever. In my mind, though, it's, you know, once it's built, I mean, we're not going to go in there and like take it away. But you know, the ability to run the restaurant and to sell alcohol, to me, even though it's just a paper, but it's just a thing that we can take, and it's just not. And I know you don't like when I use that word, but like, it is. This is your ability to run this as a restaurant and bar.
The
and
permit.
The permit is.
Yes.
And so, yeah, we can do this at, you know, we did it during zoning, but zoning is this thing where, and you know, so it's like, we're getting these assurances along the way, and it's like, to me, this is like the first piece of paper where we say, this is how it can be done here.
So let's talk about what we've worked through with the applicant to make sure some of the assurances from the Drakers and the council are being met. So the first one that is the big pink elephant in the room is that of alcohol sales. We had some very serious heartburn about everybody being able to sell alcohol. There's 3 eateries on site. It's difficult, to say the least, if one switches and one comes. And so what the Tribuanas have agreed to, and they had an attorney, and our legal counsel was on board, to constrain the alcohol to one of the areas.
Sylvia?
Yes.
If I may interrupt, that's item number 12, and we're
Oh.
on item 11.
We're on 11 and 12.
No, this public hearing has closed, so the mayor opened item 11 only.
Oh,
So it's item 11
Oh,
is the
sorry.
one that should be
Sorry.
discussed only.
okay.
I get what you're saying, though.
So check that one off. As we began to talk about the landscaping buffer and the things that would, the 6 items that are distributed and the noise issue specifically, the discussion of additional trees in that buffer, the discussion of ensuring the Drakers are included in that discussion so that things are not only appealing to the eye, but they have a function. We've had further discussions that as we go into the building process, they have offered to bring a sound engineer in. You heard some of that. So, there may be other things that need to be added, perhaps, covers on speakers and, pointing at different, we haven't gotten to that point yet because we haven't engaged the noise engineer, but happy to discuss any one of those items.
Do we have a list of the special conditions that were part of the zoning approval, and that's what's showing on the screen right now? Okay. And Councilmember Rosengarten?
I move to approve a request for a special use permit to operate a botanical garden, cafe, and eatery restaurant within the neighborhood commercial district under section 150.101 of the Land Development Code at 6405 Brodie Lane, with provisions from zoning limiting operating hours to 11 p.m., dark sky lighting as presented by the applicant, security fence around the property, moving the eastern fence 25.5 feet from the Draker property line, 10-foot fence for the eastern fencing on the property, adding additional trees to contribute to the vegetative buffer, providing water runoff conditions that have improved from current conditions.
So
Is there anything else I need to add?
Improved from current conditions, how much? That's
At all, right?
Say it again.
Like improve at all, right? Like greater than 0.
Yeah, greater than what's currently happening, so.
Not second that if I could.
All right, so we've got a motion to approve the special use permit for the restaurant operation in the neighborhood commercial with the provisions that were approved by or recommended by zoning commission, as well as the additional provisions as identified by Councilmember Rosengarten for hours of operation, dark sky lighting, security fencing, fence placement, fence height, trees, and stormwater management. Is that sound like a workable motion? Okay, we got our nod from our legal, and it's been seconded. So that'll open it up for discussion, and we'll also give the public a chance to comment as well. Councilmember Johnson?
Wasn't there a number around water runoff somewhere that I saw somewhere or heard someone say? Just an improvement? Yeah, for some reason, I forget what we were talking about, but I felt like there was.
That's my request. I'd like to be able to put a bracket because as the engineers are reviewing the calculations, et cetera, what is that?
Maybe it was just you throwing out like a hypothetical and like that just like drilled into my brain, but
Yeah,
how do we quantify that?
We were talking about the rate of runoff, but there's so many different factors of runoff. There's amount, there's the rate, and I think to be safe, since it's legally accepted by the city attorney to go with something better than 0, which is what the council member made, we're committed to that, and that's what we're going to be able to do for sure, especially since we've now added another cistern. I mean, we're really focused on improving what exists right now.
How would we measure such a thing?
Your city engineer will look at our site plan, and if it doesn't improve conditions, it won't be approved because the special use permit will not explicitly says it has to be improved over existing conditions. And if it isn't improved, it won't get the site plan itself will not match the special use permit, and therefore it can't get approved.
I'm just like a pretty concrete person, so it's like, how do you know until it rains, I guess? Which, like, I've gone through this before with other things, but.
You know, because of the modeling that's been done using Atlas 14 rainfall data and extraordinary complicated analysis that Blaine has done and has submitted to you already, and that your engineer has actually looked at and approved when they analyzed, and I know we're not there yet, when they've analyzed and approved, the engineer has approved and recommended the other two variances we're going to talk about momentarily.
Okay, so it's the model.
So, well, yeah, but just for the warm and fuzzy, so Blaine and Gary do have some numbers. It wouldn't be hard to bracket. You want an improvement of 10%.
Yeah.
Pro Tem and then Councilmember Litchfield.
I think Councilmember Johnson, they have some idea. The engineers, they have some idea because you have some specific area. And with that specific area, you have a constant, that rain, then will give it to you a factor. And with that factor, with that area, you know what volume will be. So they will understand what needs to be the capacity for storage. And after that, they need to dedicate some area. If they will have that water storage, later they will do irrigation with that water. So they have all of that. So at this moment, I think that the critical part is that in reality, if they can support that with the land, then they will be using a specific for irrigation, because that will be the volume, they will be pumping, and if they have enough area, and that area with that soil, that the capacity of the soils for infiltration, and if they need to change or do it something, this is only the engineers, they can force them to do that. If no, they cannot pass.
Yeah, so, precisely. Couldn't have said it better. If it absolutely has to be bracketed, I would say, at least the rate of stormwater coming off our property is improved by 10%, because you can't just say 10% overall. There's, as a council member will tell you, there is rate, there's the amount, there's all sorts of different factors. Yes, and the time. So we certainly can improve the rate at which the stormwater leaves our property by 10% above the current conditions. So it's already coming off our property. That's just natural flow right now, but we can improve the rate at which it comes off our property by 10%.
And that would be directly felt. That's a tangible, I believe, the Drakers would be able to point to and feel that is an improvement.
Friendly amendment.
Councilmember Litchfield.
Yeah, I share your concern, Rob, and especially with like very, very modeled data, it's a little bit tricky. And I know there's things we can measure as well. So I'd love to figure out how we can work in like soil infiltration rates, or like figure out what the actual soil's doing to, so that then as you look at the model, you can kind of measure where it is. That said, I think that's beyond the scope of this, but it is kind of it's a system where we're like trusting engineers to like have very precise models that may not be accurate. And I've built a lot of very, very like precise models that were not accurate in my career. And so like there is like some room to work on that, to be sure. But I think just requiring that they be better is about where I feel comfortable doing at this point.
Well, so, and like, I trust scientists on this. I get that is like a science, and they're gonna like run it through the models and stuff like that. Is there any appetite to throw a number out, even if it's just like against the models? I'm not saying I'm even like totally pulling for this, but Alfonso would be the person who if he is not concerned about it, then I am not concerned about it. Cause
Well, I come from a point of concern that we told the Drakers we were going to do something. And the Drakers are also concerned about the quantity of water coming off right now. I won't get into any of that. They're already concerned with what is coming off and the rate that it's coming off, right? They're already concerned in the existing condition, and not a shovel has been turned.
Yeah.
So any assurance we can give the Draker that it's 10%, the
Right.
rate
So
is,
we're both not willing to put a number on it, and also we're just saying like, well, the model showed, and when it rains, yeah. And I have talked to the applicants before about this. They are invested in having like happy neighbors, so like I don't think that's a situation that they want to like fester, but again, like, I keep on going back to this list that you guys made me read out in front of everyone. And, you know, when we can.
Yeah.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Yeah, look, I will try to explain that in this way. It's critical, the impervious cover that you will have, because that area is that you will take that and you multiply it. You say, I have so many square foot times, we will say 8 inches of water. And 8 inches in foot will be maybe 0.1 feet of water rain. So 0.8 times the square foot, and in so many minutes, I will have this amount of cubic feet of water. That cubic feet, you multiply 7.48, and you will know how many gallons of water you have. So they have that calculations, but that calculations will change if you change the impervious cover. So this is that is important for them, how much they will have of the impervious cover. Because if they have less impervious cover, less water, less volume, but perhaps it's not the best for them, for their business. So this is how that works. And if they have 18%, they don't need to do nothing because they comply with the 18%. So in that way, at this moment is because that place will be above the 18%. And because that is the case, that gave it to them the amount of water that they will have. As I am telling you, if they have more water, they have to spend a little more money in the design of the containment, the design of pumping, the area where they will be doing irrigation. Or perhaps they have to change the system that they are doing, or another pre-treatment or something. But this is something, how that works. I don't know if that.
Councilor Reeds.
So I have a question for Blaine, if you don't mind. So in your calculations for the water runoff, this seems to be the issue that the directors were concerned about. What is your, yes, you're saying that it would be improved. What is your calculation, the amount it would be improved?
So let me just preface, the calculations are based on preliminary information. The hydrologic model, which we would do for detention, is going to take time and money and effort and it's going to be very dependent on these variables Councilmember Carmona was talking about. But what we've done preliminarily would be a reduction in runoff of at least 10% of what currently goes off the site now.
Okay, so maybe a friendly amendment to the motion is to say, to incorporate that 10%.
So accepted?
Okay.
Does the second also accept that friendly amendment?
Yes.
So the amendment would be for stormwater management, providing runoff conditions that have improved from current conditions, the rate of water runoff by
a minimum
of 10%, and the applicant would be agreeable to that. All right, I'm getting nods, but we'll get a verb. We'll get a verbal. Yeah.
Yes, the applicant would be agreeable because Blaine says it's okay.
Thank you. And that meets one of our checkboxes to the Drakers, that we are at least taking that into consideration.
Councilmember Johnson.
Correct. Yeah, I'm happy you got a number so we can shoot for it. Was the 10% before or after the cisterns? I don't.
So when you talk about rainwater runoff and the rate of which, we're talking about a 100-year storm event that is, inches and inches on rainfall. The cisterns are more of a water quality component, and so they'll be full typically when you hit those bigger storm events. So they're negligible on the rainfall runoff.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Further questions, council, before we open up for members of the public? All right, if you wish to speak to agenda item number 11, which is the special use permit to operate a restaurant within the neighborhood commercial, please step up to the podium at this time, and we will be handling the alcohol permit separately in our next agenda item.
I can speak on the restaurant.
Yes, you may.
My name is Scott Draker, 759 Oakdale Drive. I'm here to voice opposition to the special use permit for restaurant use. My primary concern is the overall scale of the proposed development. I don't believe that the development fits in scale the concept traditionally thought of as neighborhood commercial. And I think that there's a couple of things that support that position. Consider hours of operation, and as a point of clarification, I didn't ask that the hours be reduced to 11 p.m. at night. I asked for actually something much more than that, because in the hours that they're proposing, they're going to be open 15 and a half hours a day. That's more than any other establishment in the city of Sunset Valley, including highway commercial. So they will be the longest daily operating commercial entity in Sunset Valley, and they will be in a neighborhood commercial zoning classification. And they will be doing this not Monday through Friday, but they'll be doing it 7 days a week. Now, it's possible that this use on that property will have no impact on me and my family. I don't think that will be the case, and I'm concerned about the what if. Councilmember Johnson, I appreciate your efforts a minute ago to try to define the what ifs, but I think that once the cat is out of the bag, it's really hard to put it back in, and it usually involves some additional variances. In the packet, and as part of the criteria that you have to go through to, I guess, determine if this is an acceptable use, one of the criterion asked, will the proposed use have an adverse effect on the value of surrounding properties? And the answer that staff provided was simply, a majority of residents on Oakdale support the development. So I'm the only one that opposes it, so therefore it must not have an adverse effect on my property value. Somebody around the corner down the street supports it, it can't possibly have an adverse effect on my property value. I think that that's a pretty weak argument. I don't see any effort and any response from any real estate professionals or an appraiser. So I really think that you have to ask each one of yourselves, will this have a negative impact on the Drakers, on the adjoining property owners? And you become the expert in this situation. Your vote will say what your expert opinion is on this matter. I have other comments about the alcohol sales. Will I have an opportunity to talk about that later?
Yes, well, that's our next agenda item. We'll also have an opportunity for speaking to that as well.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any other members of the public wish to speak to this agenda item at this time? Council, any further questions, or are we ready for vote? Councilmember Reitz?
One more question on this landscape buffer. I did not attend the Board of Adjustment meetings. Can you review that?
Yes, so currently the Galt Life Estate, the Galt property was purchased by the city with the intention, the full intention of turning it into a park. Right now, it is zoned as single-family residential. So single-family residential against neighborhood commercial would require a 100-foot buffer as a compatibility issue. They are requesting a reduction to 25 feet. Now, it's important to note that in today's code, had the Galt property already been zoned park or conservation or green space, the buffer is 0. So the buffer that the Trivianos are proposing is 25, greater than the 0 had that other property been rezoned already. There was a question as to the city bought it with green tax, it has to be a park. We already know Lone Oak tried to go through a rezoning and that's not been rezoned yet. The other issue became the contract for which the purchase was made with the Galt should have rezoned it automatically, and that's not the case. There has to be the legislative process to initiate and complete a rezoning.
Councilmember Rosengarten? Oh, sorry, Councilmember Reitz, were you?
So the Board of Adjustment did not have a vote. It was
The Board of Adjustment
postponed?
tabled it. We received the notice of Mrs. Galt's death maybe 2 days prior to the Board of Adjustment hearing. Some members of the Board of Adjustment felt that the hearing was moot because the zoning was automatic and wanted to go back and review that. Legal has since chimed in that it is not automatic. It still has to go through the zoning process. And because we are going through a Parks and Open Space Master Plan, there was concern that that zoning would not happen for a period of time.
Right. So another friendly amendment would be that this is also, this buffer would be approved by the Board of Adjustment.
So the buffer and the use, as I told Councilmember Carmona, two different things.
Okay, so that's a different.
Yes, two different things. One is a tangible, one is an intangible. Board of Adjustment will take that portion of it up because they're the ones that have purview and oversight of that. I think where Councilmember Carmona is, and I won't put words in your mouth, but as we go down that path, how that buffer impacts the overall water situation and parking situation.
So we will discuss this later on.
Perhaps,
so.
yes.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Rosengarten and then Mayor Pro Tem.
Should I add into the motion that the general criteria applicable to all special uses and temporary special uses be included from A through F?
Yes, that would be both most helpful.
So done.
And I assume the second agrees to that. Okay.
Yeah.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Yeah. City Administrator Sylvia, if at this moment we approve this special permit, or these two special permits, do we have any problems with the buffer?
No.
Thank you.
Okay.
And we have but one person who's, are you here to speak to agenda number 11, or do you want to speak to a later agenda item? Whenever I see a queue, I just want to double check.
Thank you, I appreciate that, Mayor. I just wanted to speak to Councilmember Reitz's thing. The Board of Adjustment was stuck because the presentation was all on single family, and that was it. So there was a whole backup problem, and so I don't know how that impacts your decision, but it's the fact that it was a backup problem where it was all geared towards single family that's queuing, and they asked for more information because of that. I think it's a worthwhile thing to listen to if you have time. Thank you.
Thank you.
The property continues to be zoned single family.
All right, any further questions, council? All right, so the motion is to approve the special use permit to operate a restaurant within the neighborhood commercial district under section 150.101 of the Land Development Code at 6405 Brodie Lane, with the provisions that were approved or recommended by zoning, as well as the provisions that were identified in the motion, including hours of operation limitation, dark skies lighting, security fencing, fence placement, fence height, trees, stormwater management, which includes improving the rate of runoff by at least 10%, and the additional parts of the code, which are provisions, I think, A through F. Is that correct? Or under our code? Yep. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed say nay.
Nay.
All right, the motion passes, and the special use permit to operate passes. That'll take us to agenda item number 12, which is consider an act on a request for a special use permit for alcoholic beverages to be sold in a restaurant for on-premise consumption under section 150.103A of the Land Development Code at 6405 Brodie Lane. Staff, do we want to have a presentation for this one, or does the applicant wish to speak to this item before we start taking council questions?
So I'll just touch on it very quickly. The zoning commission also approved or recommended approval of the alcohol beverage, and just to continue the discussion I was telling you when we're trying to keep things in a framed format that's this nice box we can later on, if we need to enforce, can enforce. So all parties have agreed to limit alcohol sales to one segment of the property, which is the eatery. So there isn't sort of a flip-flop of this one selling, this one selling, this one selling. So that's an agreement we have on the table. They had engaged an attorney. Our legal has chimed in. And I'll let the applicant continue after that.
Michael Whalen on behalf of the applicant. That's correct. So we went back, and the reason we're here is the TABC application has been modified. We can't even submit the TABC application without the city certification, and the city secretary cannot certify the application unless we have a special use permit, which allows for the sale of alcohol. So that's why we're here today. Again, this is exactly what we had proposed the very first time we were here with the neighborhood commercial. We also have sent to city legal and your city manager, and they can talk about what it says and what it doesn't say. The alcohol beverage code provisions, which make it clear, most importantly, that there can be no overlapping TABC permits, thereby prohibiting multiple operators to sell alcoholic beverages at the same time, or at the same location, excuse me. So one permit, one location, which is why it'll be tied to 6405. And for purposes, so that was the really big thing that we heard, and that was the feedback we heard and we responded to. But we're available to answer any questions, obviously, related to that, and city legal can also as well, since you'll get a more neutral response from them.
One of the other things that concerned staff, which is why we brought this discussion to bear, was if any one of the eateries went out or found alcohol sales obviously are very lucrative, right? And so if they're struggling in the food sale, and alcohol just kind of happened to go there. So applicants have willingly agreed to put the brackets around and said this will be where the alcohol is sold, and we can very easily measure alcohol to food from that perspective.
Okay. Council, questions for staff or the applicants? Councilmember Johnson?
Just a question for Sylvia. Can you say that last part again? So just like practically speaking, it will be like you can go up and order, you will order at two different places, or they need to be kind of tied together so that they can measure?
Measurement is across 6405, period. No overlapping TABC. The alcohol is held at the eatery component. So I can measure how much receipts and alcohol at the eatery, and then how much food receipts from the outlying. So it's the site as a whole, but for an ease of tracking, alcohol sales only allowed at that central eatery location.
Okay.
All right, so if members of the public wish to speak to the special use permit for alcoholic beverages, now is the time to go up to the podium for this item.
Scott Draker, 759 Oakdale Drive. I oppose the special use permit for alcohol sales. There was discussion at the zoning commission meeting. I think it was finally acknowledged that if this site gets alcohol sales approval, they will be the only entity in Sunset Valley selling alcohol next door to single-family residents. I think that's a bad precedent to set.
Thank you. Are there any other members of the public that wish to speak to this item? So council, at this time, if you have no further questions, it'd be appropriate to make a motion either way, but we don't have an active motion on the table at this point. I see Councilmember Rosengarten calculating, but Councilmember Litchfield, you got your hand raised first.
So somebody put the language up there so I can read it. Thank goodness. I'd like to make a motion to approve the special use permit for alcoholic beverages to be sold in a restaurant for on-premises consumption under section 150-103A of the Land Development Code at 6405 Brodie Lane.
And do we need to add any special conditions to that, Sylvia, per what was approved at zoning?
And
TBC took care of the no overlapping permit.
Okay. Okay, there's a motion to approve the special use permit for alcoholic beverages. Is there a second?
Oh, and if I may amend that to include sections 1 through 5 of that 150-103, but I believe that that's already in the, I already mentioned that. So never mind. I think it's included. Thank you.
All right, so the motion is for the approval of special use permit for alcoholic beverages. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Councilmember Reed seconds. All right, so with that, we'll open up for further discussion. So Councilmember Johnson, you had your hand raised to ask a question about the motion, or at this point.
Right, so this is embarrassing. What was the last, what did we do for 11? What was the motion for 11? Do we have that written down?
Exactly what it says, right there. Number 11, motion is special use permit.
Oh, okay.
But also included the provisions as recommended by zoning, as well as the provisions that were identified by the motion maker in the second.
Okay, but that doesn't, okay, what I was saying was like the things that we had added on are not up there. No. Oh, yeah, sorry. Correct, okay.
Oh, do you want to see those? I can.
I just felt a little crazy looking up there and being told that they were up there and not. No, we're good.
Any further discussion on this, on the motion or this agenda item? All right, I'm going to move to vote. So all those in favor of approval of the special use permit for alcoholic beverages to be sold in a restaurant for on-premise consumption under section 150.103A of the Land Development Code at 6405 Brodie Lane, say aye.
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 All opposed, say nay.
Nay.
The motion passes. All right, that'll take us to the next ones, which are variances. This is considered act on approval, agenda item number 13, considered act on approval of the following variance request at 6405 Brodie Lane for impervious cover under chapter 150.332H, previously chapter 4.301, impervious cover subsection H, section 150.593 parking dimension standards, and as well as the city engineer response to requests from applicant. And we'll begin with a staff presentation, and then we'll go to the applicant for an overview. Unless you have anything else to add at this time.
Trying to get there.
Okay.
That's a toughie. Hang on. All right, Mayor and Council, the item before you is a combination of two variance requests. The first one is impervious cover variance from 18% to 26.8%, and also to exclude the building eaves and water quality structures from the impervious cover calculation. The second part of that is a variance to section 150.593 parking dimension standards for both of those variances for the property located at 6405. The issue that is, and the applicant can address the super detail. What I wanted to bring to the council's attention is the fact that we haven't seen the final plat, and the fact that we have not gotten to any finality of any stages. What you're going to be approving tonight, if you approve it, is the opportunity for staff to finalize the site plan and for staff to get through all of the actions necessary that the applicant can meet these items. So that's always of a little bit of concern to me. I'm normally handling things through the plat, but this is where we are with this particular, and this is how our code makes it go through. The concern from my part is as we go through the platting and as we go through something else, and as Blaine described, as we jump into some of the more detailed items, something may pop up and impervious cover might need to be, 29% or whatever that is. As long as everybody in the room knows that what's being approved is what's being approved and you can't vary from that, you're giving staff the opportunity to go and work through and make sure that is ensured, and that we are going to hold the applicant to that number. There's no room for leeway.
Unless we come back, if there's been a mistake.
This group ain't gonna wanna see you come back.
We're just following your code right now. Your code makes us go through this process, which is extraordinarily expensive and burdensome, as you can imagine. We're happy to be here. Michael Whalen on behalf of the applicant, if you can go back to our presentation real quickly. I think it's one of the tabs up there open. Yeah. Yep, that's fine. So again, these are it's these two variances that Sylvia just mentioned, city manager just mentioned. The parking dimension modification to reduce parking space length from 18.5 to 17.5 feet by 1 foot, which helps us reduce impervious cover, and reduce drive aisle width from 26 feet to 25 feet and at 23 feet for single loaded parking. These are pretty critical, and Blaine's going to go in quite a bit of detail on the tree protection that this will allow, and we have our traffic engineer to also support any questions you have about why we have the number of parking spaces we have. It's very much related to safety, so we don't have people parking off-site, and also so we don't have people parking on the grass, which I know Councilmember Carmona would talk to about how bad that would be to have oil dripping into the grass as well. And then the other one is the impervious cover, approving 26.8% impervious cover and excluding the building eaves and water quality structures from the impervious cover calculations, which I believe you did pretty recently in another case. And if you go down to slide 8, I believe, page 8, yeah, thanks. And again, this is exactly what we showed you when we first introduced ourselves for the zoning case, and this is precisely what 26.8% looks like, and precisely what the parking modifications look like. Yes, it is preliminary, but we have spent, as you can imagine, with civil engineer, traffic engineer, alcohol beverage lawyer, me, quite a bit of money to try and be sure that we're following the code and that we're getting all of the variances needed before we do file the site plan and before we do file the plat, so that when we come back for that plat approval, it meets the standards that have been set forth in these motions that you have already passed. I'm going to turn it over to Blaine, our civil engineer, now to take it from this slide.
Thank you. Blaine Stansberry, I'm the civil engineer working on this Botanical Garden Cafe and Eatery project. And Sylvia, if you'd please go to slide 9. So in addition to the special use request that you just granted, we're asking for the 2 variances as outlined by Michael Whalen. The first of these adjusts the parking dimensions as he outlined, reducing the depth of the parking by a foot and reducing the drive aisle width from 26 feet to 25 feet for the majority, and then in areas where we have single loaded parking, 23 feet, and that further reduction protects trees. This adjustment is critical because we want to limit the amount of pavement over tree root zones to the extent possible, and this is important to our overall vision of a green garden-like environment. The reduced length and width also allows us to meet our needed parking count while keeping impervious cover to the minimum needed to ensure an economically feasible project. Importantly, our proposed adjustments would not impact the functionality of parking. The length and drive aisle standards largely follow those set by the City of Austin today and standard engineering practice. Furthermore, our adjusted drive aisle width exceeds Sunset Valley's own requirements for local roadways, where this traffic volumes for those roadways would be higher than what our parking lot is projecting. Slide 10, please. Oh, just one more thing. On the bottom of that slide, there are dimensions showing those parking spaces, kind of how they look, and accessibility spaces also would meet requirements. Okay, slide 10, please. This exhibit was landscape architect was heavily involved in this project as well. This shows the existing and proposed trees. This is one of the main factors driving the parking lot design, is going around all of the existing beautiful heritage trees. And we've carefully designed this parking lot for their protection. So these variances ensure that we are able to provide the amount of parking that the Tribianas have determined is critical for this site, which protects the neighborhood from overflow traffic. These requested adjustments are what makes all that possible, and it does so in a manner that maintains the functionality of the parking lot and is consistent with related City of Sunset Valley and City of Austin standards. All right, moving on to slide 11, please. I want to talk about water quality and stormwater management as related to the impervious cover variance. So we're asking for the 26.8, which as noted excludes eaves and cisterns from that calculation. We've tailored this request only to the impervious cover that we feel that we are going to need to ensure that this project is a success, economically viable. The vast majority of our impervious cover is used for parking. It's 22.4% of our request. That's, 4/5 of it. As noted, parking is absolutely vital to this type of amenity, and in order to move forward, the Tribianas need to know that their customers can come and park on the site. And this also serves the dual purpose of keeping the parking lot contained on the site and avoid risking spillover into the adjacent neighborhood of Oakdale, which is a very narrow street. At the same time, we're actively improving the site's existing runoff and water quality conditions. That is, our project will produce better outcomes on both runoff and water quality than what exists on the site today and what otherwise would be required by code. And this exhibit demonstrates in practice how that would work with subsurface water quality retention and then irrigation, and then the vegetative filter in the back, and then the center area for detaining the increased flows. In other words, while an impervious cover variance is critical to delivering on this project, we are going above and beyond in managing that impervious cover and will be actively improving the way the site currently functions. So I'm going to turn it back over to Michael Whalen.
We can just go to the last slide. Really, this has been a journey, and we appreciate very much your patience, your feedback. We appreciate the Drakers' feedback and the neighbors' feedback. We've obviously knocked on a lot of doors. We've spoken to a lot of you, and the city engineer's feedback and obviously the city planning, city manager's feedback. We've been consistent with this particular image. Up front, we drew it, we've stuck to it. We have made the two modifications, both of which we believe were prompted by your particular feedback, one with the median at the front, with, as the traffic engineer pointed out, Councilmember Johnson does provide for fire access, which I didn't know, which is why I didn't answer the question. And the second one was adding an additional cistern again to help with water quality, which I know Mr. Carmona, Councilmember Carmona has, elevated as an appropriate issue that we should be mindful of. So again, this is what you saw last month, except for those two small areas. And with that in mind, with all the effort, we do ask respectfully for your support of these two variances so that we can proceed and bring you what we believe will be truly something you can be proud of. I think you've heard from lots of supporters previously at the zoning hearing about what this and how this syncs up with some of the values that your marketing committee and others have wanted to promote here. Thank you all very much.
Thank you. We'll start with Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you, Mayor. If it's possible, Sylvia, can we go back to the City Council agenda item 10.2, where we have the table? Yeah, that table. No, the table where we have the neighborhoods and permit site requirement is the regulations for adjoining districts. You have that here. So when you will go to the agenda 10.12, you will go back and you will see this table. That's it. Okay. So in that, this is the 150-61 for retails. And we were talking about the restaurant. And if can you go down, please? More, please. So the alcoholic, and later a little more. So in the right side, you can see that it's a compatibility and buffering standards. So in this case, this is why I am a little confused, because if we have some variance, why this variance didn't came to us? Because that went to the Board of Adjustment. And in the Board of Adjustment, they discuss up, down, and they send that back. So for me at this moment, we have to pass this. Because at this moment, for us, with the maps that they show us, these schematics, that schematics. So if you will see on the top, if you will say north, the not necessarily is north, is north of the property. The north of the property has 25 feet. And according with this, they want to have 100 foot. And I hear the applicant, if you have 100 foot buffer, they lost almost 40% of the property. So that line is 25. According with this, has to be 100 foot. So if they move that 100 foot, they were losing 40% of the space, the surface. So that was the discussion. So in my mind at this moment, looking in-house, City Council and Board of Adjustment, I don't want to have some challenge between us. We have the applicant here, and the applicant, he submit a lot of good information. It's clear. But now, we have to be careful what we are reading and that interpretation, because we will do a judgment. And city administrator, what is your position with this?
So thank you for pointing that out, Councilmember Carmona. So as we spoke on Saturday, there's a couple of divergent paths in our code that are perfectly legal. The Board of Adjustment is empowered to hear those things related to property that will be considered something that we take from somebody, an exaction. And those things are said to be somebody's full enjoyment of their property, their full and utter highest and best use of that property. Because it's a taking of essentially a right, it doesn't come here. It's got to go to Board of Adjustment, because Board of Adjustment is a quasi-judicial board, and they appeal to Board of Adjustment. If Board of Adjustment were to turn them down, their appeal is directly to court, to district court. It does not come to city council. It goes directly to court, because the court will now hear a case that has potential negative impacts to the client not being able to have all of their constitutional rights abided by. That's why it goes to Board of Adjustment. That's the first piece. The second piece, on the buffering piece, it's a very no man's land right now, because our future land use map, our own future land use map, calls it out as park and green space, right? The untimely passing of Mrs. Galt, the assumption was it's going to be rezoned to parkland immediately, and therefore no buffer is needed. Well, that's not the case. The case is very specific today, because we have to prepare Board of Adjustment as if we're preparing to go to court, always. All of those items are prepared specifically to defend in court. Today, the facts of the case are that the property at Mrs. Galt is zoned single family. And that is the fact of the case. Nobody can deny that. Zoning Commission has not heard a case to rezone the property to park. And they may not hear it for several months. They may not hear it. Or Zoning Commission may hear it and deny a rezoning, deny recommending it to council for whatever reason. And so as we prepare a case for Board of Adjustment, we have to just go on the facts of the case. Now, secondly, if it were zoned park, if indeed somebody snapped their fingers tomorrow and zoned it park, we called a special meeting, we advertised it was ready to go to park, there wouldn't be any buffer required, none. So let's assume the other way. Let's assume that they deny a rezoning. Let's assume that it's single family residential, and let's assume that Board of Adjustment also denies the 25 foot, and Board of Adjustment says, nope, you gotta have 100 feet. Gotta have 100 feet. Obviously, they're going to appeal it to court, because our own maps call it as park. That's the first thing. But secondly, the project would die at that point. They do not have enough to meet 100 foot, and they have said that time and time again.
Yep.
So they're in a circular reference almost.
Yeah. Thank you. It was a big route. I would like to find the short route. Today, we have the applicants. Today, we have to provide one decision. So if at this moment we accept that 25 feet, we don't have problems later? A few,
no.
And a straight answer, please.
No, you are not accepting, today you are not making any decision on the buffer. Today you are making a decision on a percentage of impervious cover, and you are making a decision on a parking dimension. Irrelevant of the buffer. Irrelevant of the buffer.
So, in that case, if that is the case and they need to move 100 foot, they have to change the configuration. And if they change the configuration, perhaps they don't have in the way that they have. And as you said, they didn't submit the plat. So, this is not easy. So this is why I would like to have a very good advisor then I don't want to have problems with the community board of adjustments and be sure what I am doing. So this is mainly, thank you.
And that's my note in the report, that it is unfortunate and unusual that we're before you asking, or the applicant is before you asking for something when there are still some unknowns in the air. Unfortunately, there's two legislative paths that are happening at the same time. One may or may not be helped.
So I saw Councilmember Litchfield and then Councilmember Rosengarten.
Yes, thank you. So going back to like, we've seen this plan, and when I approved this plan, like the first time, my pushback was this impervious cover is way too high. So it's still there. That's still what I'm thinking. I understand the concerns. I get it. I understand that it's engineered that it will be better than it has to be and all this. But this impervious cover is just way too high for me to feel comfortable with. Given what I always hoped to do, with the adjoining lot, given the kind of Board of Adjustments situation right now with this setback not being approved, in my ideal world, we would kind of table this till we hear back from the Board of Adjustments and then work on actually figuring out how do we get that adjacent land turned into a park and get that better integrated and sort of things like that. Like the kind of landscape has literally changed around us. And so I'd be reluctant to approve a 27% almost impervious cover at this point. So that's kind of what I'm thinking. And also the eaves issue on the Trowbridge plat, those were huge eaves, 3 stories up in the air. Totally support not counting that as impervious. I don't see or know anything about the nature of these structures and whether that's a similar, like, is that a good apples to apple comparison as far as subtracting the eaves? I love the idea of subtracting eaves in general, where they're, because they provide shade and all this sort of thing, but I don't know if that's appropriate given the nature of these structures, which is still at this point unknown. So.
Okay. And Blaine, if you can address that question.
Okay, Blaine Stansberry, regarding the eaves of this site, most eaves are typically 3 feet overhang the building. We do not have architectural drawings yet at this point, and so that is an assumption that these are 3-foot eaves around the perimeter of the building. I would like to note that for impervious cover calculations for the city of Austin do not include eaves. That, the rain, you can find that your house can be wet next to your house even with eaves.
Councilmember Rosengarten? And I'm sorry, did you want to speak to this? Okay.
I was going to speak to the impervious cover item. Most of that is parking. I would like, just for 30 seconds or less, our traffic engineer just to speak to why we have that parking there, because it really is a pretty meaningful safety concern, which is why we have that impervious cover. So if just for 30 seconds, if you could just listen to what the analysis was, not from me, but from somebody else.
Good evening, Council. Bob Actorani, traffic consultant for the applicant. So in our evaluation of the parking, there's a lot of things that go into play when we look at how much parking is needed. Obviously, demand is the largest item that goes in, but what's unique about this is the right sizing of parking. We don't want to overpark, but we also don't want to underpark. That's the more critical aspect, especially given where this project is. We don't want to burden the adjacent neighborhood. There's plenty of examples that you can drive down South Lamar and see overflow parking in neighborhoods, and that's exactly what we're trying to prevent here. So we need to make sure that we're able to get people in, circulated, which is why that median was added to the driveway throat, and have people be able to park. But again, the critical nature of this is we make sure this is right sized, and that's why we're so focused on the additional cistern with water quality to account for all of that.
Councilmember Rosengarten? Oh, sorry. Did you want to speak some more?
I'm sorry, may I add one more
Please do.
bit of information? This amount of parking is so critical for this project to be a success for these families. Providing adequate parking protects the aquifer. I just cannot stress that enough, because let's say we didn't have all this parking, but you would still have a certain number of people coming. And those people are going to park on the grass. They're going to park on the tree roots. They're going to park in the adjacent neighborhood. And so if we can get them parking on pavement, we can drain that pavement to our water quality features, and we can treat it, and we can detain it. We can't do that if we don't have enough parking. And that's what's driving the impervious cover number.
I'm sorry, Rita, go ahead. Go ahead. So we don't have building plans. We don't have any architectural plans. Is there any plan for the eateries, the 3 small eateries, to be on pier and beam, or what is the plan for that? Because ostensibly we allow decks and docks that big that are on pier and beam to water flow through, and we don't count that toward impervious cover. So is that an option, that these are on pier and beam as opposed to slab foundation?
Those kind of things have not been discussed. So,
Councilmember Rosengarten and then Councilmember Johnson.
I would like to move into executive session for the next 10 to 15 minutes.
So there's a motion to move into executive session to discuss this item, I assume?
Yes,
Okay.
sir.
Is there a second for that?
I'll second.
Councilmember Reitz seconds. All those in favor of the motion to move into executive session to discuss this item, say aye. And consult with the legal attorney, I assume, the city attorney. Okay.
of course. Except
That's,
Aye.
Yep. All right. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say nay. All right. We are going to move into executive session, and at the time is 8:32, and we'll reconvene after we conclude the executive session, which hopefully will be 10, 15 minutes. p.m. And council, the first thing we're going to need to do is take action to extend our meeting past the 9 o'clock hour, if I can get a motion to do so. Councilmember Johnson.
I motion we extend 1 hour till 10 p.m.
Councilmember Reed.
I'll second.
All right. All those in favor say aye.
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 All opposed say nay. All right, we're going to extend our meeting till 10 o'clock, or up till 10 o'clock. With that, we're going to resume our discussion on agenda item number 13. Councilor Rosengart.
I will say that I am in favor of the project. We had some concerns on impervious cover. Is there anything that you could see, out of curiosity, that might be the easiest area to reduce impervious cover?
Thomas Tribbiani, an applicant. On that site plan, did you see before you, it actually has the breakdown, and of the 26.8% that we're requesting, there's only less than 5% is in buildings. It's the parking. And if you have visited the number of places that are similar, this may be new to Sunset Valley, it's not new to Austin, Texas. If you go to Radio and other places where they provide 60, 70 parking spaces, it's a mess. It's inadequate, and there's all kind of street parking. So we have very much limited the amount of impervious coverage. There are a couple of items I just would like to address. If one way or another we do not get relief from the 100-foot landscape buffer to the north, we're done. He's correct, it's 38.5% goes away, and so we're hopeful that that will get approved. I mean, but if they choose not to approve it, or this project's done, then it's been killed. The other thing that we feel very strongly, because it impacts, there is no off-street parking. And so we're asking to reduce the width of the parking, to what is basically City of Austin standards in the drive width. That cut the impervious coverage a couple percent, every month. And our commitment is that we will improve both stormwater runoff and the quality, okay? And we've hired someone that we think's passionate about the Edwards Aquifer to work on that. So I just don't see. Justin, you want to address that, please?
I would just like to add that we started working on this and talking with neighbors and the Drakers and people from council and staff. This process began 6 months ago, and it's been an ongoing input and kind of give and take, and we're listening and trying to make as many changes as we can, and we've pushed as far as we can and squeezed down as far as we can to where we feel comfortable that this project will be successful and it will protect the neighborhood. And that, so we've done everything that we can. This has been 6 months of listening and working with feedback. So we've tried, and this site plan that you see is a result of that.
May I continue? I move to approve a requested variance to section 150.332H, impervious cover of the Land Development Code, to allow for increased impervious cover from 18% to 26.8%, and to exclude building eaves and water quality structures from the impervious cover calculation. And section 150.593 parking, dimension standard for the proposed botanical restaurant and eatery located at 6405 Brodie. I also want to include in the motion that on the impervious cover, that it be tied to the special use permit of this botanical garden cafe and eatery restaurant.
All right, so the motion is to approve the impervious cover variance and with the requested changes not to include the eaves for the cisterns. That also to include approval of variance for the parking dimensions changes, with the addition that it's tied to the special use permit, and that's specifically such that if the special use permit goes away, then this variance would also go away. It wouldn't be transferable to other applicants. Is there a second for that motion?
I'll second.
And second from Councilmember Johnson. Let's open up for further discussion. Councilmember Reitz.
I just want to say that I also like this project a lot. This fits, I think, with our vision for the city. And in particular, we just went through a retreat and spent a lot of time together. And one of the, and we had visioning exercises. And one of them, part of it was to promote business opportunities that fit our value system. And I do believe this does that. It does promote the business opportunity, but it's very environmentally conscious, and it is something I think we'd be very proud of with all of these types of stipulations that we have here. The other thing that I really liked was, even though the parking is an issue, the parking plan itself, I like how all the trees are saved. They're beautiful trees, and the fact that, it's really hard, I'm looking at it, and to have anybody else park anywhere else. If you have a full parking lot, you can't park anywhere else. It's all blocked off, and so you really can't park on any other green space. And so the design, I think, is very good with that. So that's it.
Councilmember Johnson, and then Mayor Pro Tem Camarano.
You make a good point about, but you mentioned they can't park anywhere else. If you've ever been to Matt's El Rancho, it used to be just on Fridays and Saturdays, but like any day of the week past 5, they just park on the grass. Is there going to be any fencing or anything to?
It's Brodie.
Yeah. Well, there's lots of parking at Matt's El Rancho as well, but they just pull up on the grass. So is there going to be anything to?
Yeah, Michael Whalen on behalf of the applicant. There's parking stops at the end of each one of those parking spots. So around, there'll be a big parking curb, like you see in a parking lot.
Okay, so the problem with Matt's is like, well, where there's not parking stops, there are trees. So it's like that's what's preventing, I guess. Okay, great. So one thing I didn't hear brought up here was I thought I heard something about like there's actually a penalty for going at like every percentage that you go up. Is this true? In impervious cover? Doesn't it? Yes, no? I'll look at anyone who thinks they recognize what I'm saying.
Tom Tribbiani, not sure it's appropriate to discuss here, but indeed our contract with the Betty Grubbs estate, we're incented to try to reduce the impervious coverage. So there were penalties for anything that was above 25%. So we need the 26.8. We're prepared to pay the additional price.
Okay, so you are going into this with your eyes open that it's like I'm sorry, I didn't know that was, I'm a vessel for public information, so if you tell me, I'm going to say it. Sorry. The way that impervious cover works, and it has to come to council even though there might be just like a computer programmer up here trying to make a decision on it all. And I've always had issues with it. I always complain to Sylvia about the decision that we have to make. And in past impervious cover, it was always, well, what we're going to do is we want more impervious cover. We're going to mitigate the water, and we're going to cut down all these oak trees. And some of those things have been approved, and it just makes me wonder, like, what we're doing it for. What I do like about this is that we brought it up multiple times before, but it's like you're kind of going around the trees, saving like what I feel is important. Now, what I'm also always confused about with impervious cover is you're going over the percentage that we allow in Sunset Valley, but all that water is treated, and it's treated down to a percentage that we're happy with. if there's anyone else on council that has a problem with the increased impervious cover, I want to, if it's treated, and we can't talk about the trees because like that's not part of the impervious cover regulation, but if the water can be treated to have it brought down to 18%, at that point I don't understand like what the issue is besides just seeing a sea of parking spaces, which if it's between like I kind of get it, the difference between like grass and like parking, but to me it's just like, I don't know. So if anyone wants to weigh in on that. Okay, I think that was all my notes that I went over, but thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Yeah, would you like to give it to us what was the motion at this moment, and if that is tied to a special permit or something, please? So we can go specific clarification in that motion, please.
Sure, and I didn't write down the motion, apologies. And I'll state it in general, and if the motion maker or the second want to make any corrections, but the motion is to approve the request for variance to the impervious cover under chapter 150.332H for 26.8%, and to not include in that calculation the eaves of the buildings or the water quality features, which is the cistern pads. As well as the variance for section 150.593 parking dimension standards to reduce the width of both the parking as well as the drive aisles, with the condition that the variance approvals are tied to the special use permit that we previously approved for the operating a restaurant within the neighborhood commercial. And so if that special use permit is no longer extant, then the variance would no longer be applicable. It would not, they'd be tied together. That's what I believe the motion was for. Is that?
Yeah, thank you. I think that was clear.
Okay.
Thank you.
Councilmember Litchfield.
And just to answer Councilmember Johnson, so to my mind, they're quite distinctly not the same. Like treated down to 18% is very different from 18%. I'm still trying to formulate like a very strong justification in my own mind, but that's my feeling. And when I look at it, like that's the value that we kind of hold. I understand. I love this project so much. Like if this project was 18%, that'd be amazing to me. But like treated to 18% from 27 is just not, it's not the same, even though it might be engineered or certified to be the same. But I'll keep thinking about that because I really want to, I really want to formulate that well, but I haven't quite grokked it well.
Are there further questions from council or discussion before we open it up to the public for comments? Councilmember Johnson.
I had one more thought, and I just hadn't written it down, but again, we are, with the amount of parking, I see an effort to keep cars off of Oakdale, which is like, we don't, like, I think we're all, we've gone through this with some other projects where there's this kind of like, you know, all these cross concerns, and this is one trade-off that I feel like very comfortable with, where it's just like, we got the trees, there's parking, keeps people off Oakdale, the water's treated. It's just like, kind of give me warm fuzzies.
All right, at this time, if there's members of the public that wish to speak to this agenda item, please go ahead and rise to the podium.
Scott Draker, 759 Oakdale. I'm here to voice opposition to approval of the variance. There's something almost comical about the discussion that's being had here tonight. And I hope, Sylvia, when y'all go back and rewrite the land development code, when you talk about impervious cover being limited to 18%, you put in the caveat that unless it's required for full economic benefit of the property and that it's adequately mitigated, because that seems to be all that needs to be said to get approval for a variance for impervious cover. A comment, Councilmember Johnson, about the trees. You're seeing trees, you're seeing the canopy of the trees abutting the parking spaces. What you need to appreciate is that under that canopy is shade. Where do people love to park? In the sun? No, in the shade. So those are very enticing spots when the parking lot's full is, hey, I'll just park in the shade, pull up on the curb. I drive a Jeep, an SUV, whatever it is, no problem. So I think you're going to need a little bit more than the canopy of a tree overhanging the driveway and the parking space to keep people out of the grass. There's a lot of reasons to deny the request for the variance, and environmental, but there's another one that I would like to bring your attention to, and that's equity. When the city reduced the impervious cover, well, historically, impervious cover in the city of Sunset Valley was 15% for residential and 40% for commercial. When the city reduced impervious cover, 18% for residential, 40% for commercial. When the city reduced the impervious cover limitations for commercial, a big factor in that decision was equity. It's very hard to tell a commercial property owner, especially when that property owner was formerly a residential property owner, that by checking a box and changing your zoning designation to 40%, to commercial, even neighborhood commercial, you now are entitled to almost 2.5 times the impervious cover that old Joe down the street is not entitled to. So if Joe down the street wants to widen his driveway or anything like that, he's not allowed to do that because he's stuck with 18% impervious cover. Now keep in mind that Joe is not adding traffic, is not adding parking, is not adding vehicles, is not adding trip counts, not necessarily anyway. And so he's doing nothing per the general discussion that's being had tonight. He's doing nothing to impact water quality. So there's a certain matter of equity that I think needs to be considered when anytime you consider a variance to our impervious cover ordinances. And then also there's the issue of precedence. The applicant has already referred to tonight another occasion where y'all granted a variance to impervious cover. So that approach is just going to continue to happen, again, letting the cat out of the bag. I'd also like to call your attention, could you put the table from section 150, 164 back on the board, the one that Alfonso, yeah, that's it. So Alfonso, that was a great question that you answered earlier. I was wondering if anybody was going to question that. My question is in paragraph 3. Can you scroll down a little bit? Column 3. Can you scroll down a little bit? So column 3, is that the bottom of the table? Oh, okay, scroll up just a little bit then, sorry. You scrolled up too much. But right there at the bottom, stop. Right there at the bottom of paragraph 3 where the cursor is, it says impervious cover not to exceed allowable under watershed provisions of this code. It seems to me the way I interpret this table is that if you grant a variance to impervious cover, then you're invalidating the neighborhood commercial designation, because only if the impervious cover does not exceed the allowable under the code can you qualify for neighborhood commercial.
Any other members of the public wish to speak at this time? I was asking if any other members of the public wish to speak at this time. Council, any additional questions? Councilmember Johnson?
Well, I'm trying to.
You can direct a question to staff to answer a member of the public if they raise a question that you want answered.
Yeah, can anyone explain that to me?
So I think the question is, Councilmember Johnson wants to get clarification on the question raised during the member of the public that came to speak.
Correct. So the section that's provided to you, and again, Veronica Rivera, Assistant City Attorney, the table that's provided is what's in the neighborhood commercial. But again, other sections of your land development code allow for variances to take place. So that's what's required in neighborhood commercial unless there's a variance requested, and that's what's happening here. That's why you have an agenda item, because there's a variance being requested for the impervious cover.
Does that answer your question?
I feel like the suggestion was that by allowing it, it potentially bumps it up to a different level of. So I'm just trying to like align the point he was trying to make. But I'm cool if you want to come back up. My call.
Actually, what I'm saying is that the table suggests that if you grant a variance to impervious cover, you're going to be recalling the zoning change to neighborhood commercial. So therefore, it would revert back to single family, not go above neighborhood commercial.
And if you could just answer that question, is there, if
Right.
under the circumstances?
So no, it would not be reverting back. Again, the other section of your code, land development code, allows for variances.
Okay. Any other questions or discussion on this before we move to a vote? Council, it looks like we're ready for a vote. So the motion is to approve the impervious cover, variance to impervious cover, as well as the variance to the parking dimensions with the tie to the special use permit for the neighborhood commercial restaurant operation. All those in favor say aye.
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 All opposed say nay.
Nay.
Motion passes, and the variance requests are approved with the tie to the special use permit. All right, thank you all. We are going to now, and thank you to the applicants and to the residents that spoke on this item. We're now going to resume our discussion of agenda item number 14. Consider an act on approval of budget amendment number 6 for fiscal year 2022 as recommended by Budget and Finance Committee.
So I was going to say something right as we hit the 7 o'clock time, which is, at least for the two software pieces, the money's been spent, right? So. For Laserfish. Okay, maybe I shouldn't say spent, but we're in the process of spending it because it was within.
Well, there's two parts. There's the Laserfish document backup, right? And then there's the page freezer.
Right.
Okay. So you're saying that the Laserfiche is underway and been spent, or is it, that's not underway yet as far as?
I guess not. I guess that's what this was. My apologies. So the page freezer money has been spent, or is in the process of being spent. It was within the amount that you were
correct
allowed to, and we needed to kind of get it in place because our old site was about to go offline. So
of that that's $11,000 for both those items. I think the page freezer was $2,000 or $2,400. I can't remember how much it was. So that's of that portion.
And then for Laserfiche, we, instead of waiting till next budget cycle to get the money approved, because the website was, I'll let you go and say, because the website, okay.
Can you tell me which of them?
Oh,
because
I'm sorry.
they specify here, so that will be clear for me. So you have 0015782 software maintenance fees, Dell docking stations, Dell monitors, Panasonic equipment.
He's not talking about equipment, hardware. He's talking about the software program called Page Freezer.
Well, and I want to talk about the other one as well.
Okay,
So, yeah.
okay.
So, but the $11,000, which is for, I think it's the third one down in that.
11,000.
You want me to go to the table?
He's got it.
Yeah, we currently have $80,000 in the 5782 line, and the budget adjustment would increase that to $91,000 to account for the additional software acquisitions as part of our website transition.
I just want, so I just wanted to, because I think there was like some movement to only approve certain parts of it, and I was like, whoa, like we really need those things. So
Okay, I'm sorry. I think that perhaps the most important is the discussion. So, and in that way, I understand that it's important, and I understand if we don't have money, from where we will find, but if at this moment we don't have the communication between us.
Okay, yeah.
This is the only, so.
I just felt like we were like steamrolling towards a potential motion. I was like, whoa, let's just,
Councilor
where'd
Reed?
everyone go?
They don't want to talk about budget adjustments? I mean, Councilor Reeds.
If we can talk about the computer equipment acquisition. Now, if you can pull up that document that you had from our July meeting, this was correct me if I'm wrong, but I think we were all in agreement that we needed these computers. I mean, these were computers with Windows 7, was it, or something? And they're very outdated. There are security risks, all of those issues, and we needed to do that. The only outstanding issue was whether or not it was better to lease them versus purchase them, and it sounds like there's been some sort of research on that, and that y'all have come to the conclusion that it is better to purchase them. And if y'all could review that.
Chief, you want me to take it, or you want to take it? Okay, perfect.
Yes, when we went back to look at if we could get a better deal through a lease, we found that one set of the computers could be leased, and the city would have saved about $1,100, but the Tough Books couldn't be. The Tough Book laptops, there's no lease for that, and there was a lease through Dell that actually ended up costing more than just purchasing them. So purchasing them turned out to be the better option for us. Plus, this is only one set of computers that need to be replaced. When the computers that aren't out of date right now come up, we're gonna have we would have to lease those. So we would have two different leases that we would have to keep track of, which we haven't done so good of a job when it comes to computers at knowing when to replace them and all that. So purchasing them is the better option than trying to lease
Councilmember Litchfield.
Yeah, so I have two thoughts on this. One, it's like been 8 months since we like preliminarily approved it, and the productivity loss in that 8 months seems like, that's like stunning to me, and I'm really disappointed there. But like, let's get better and faster at doing stuff. Like, I'm all about it. The other thing about this is I know I've had it cited at me several times that there's this like closet full of laptops that nobody knows what to do with. What's it gonna take to get our inventory of this sort of thing so that we can manage this proactively? Because this seems like a very low-hanging fruit and like productivity gains.
We just talked about having staff come in on a weekend and everybody do inventory, because inventory is a budget and finance item. It's been an item that's never been called out on the audit or financial statements. And then there's questions as to the what we're actually targeting. And there was a policy about we're not going to track anything under $1,000.
Mm-hmm.
That's a lot. For a city our size, that's kind of a lot. So Public Works has done probably the best job out of anybody, because they went and did their inventory, I don't know, less than a year ago, maybe 10 months ago. They've got to come back and do theirs. PD and administration need to do ours better, but the practice had been to just shove them in a closet. That had been the practice. We need to get better at geotagging. We need to get better, not geotagging, just inventory tagging, and getting just the inventory. And the only thing right now is an Excel spreadsheet that may or may not have been stored on somebody's C drive. So,
sure. And then I just remember we were asked several times about that over the course of the budget and finance. So, just like trying to get there. But yes.
Councilmember Johnson.
The 8 months is, I get it. Like, we need to get better at that. I also think it's crazy that like our lieutenant of the police was the person who was like putting this together. So I really like Univista, but like, man, when that comes up for, I'm gonna really struggle to like, especially if it's like $8,000 to implement all these. I'm like, holy, like I want to almost do this as a living.
Well, the other option is that we could look at having a full-time IT administrator for a city with 30 people. It's not unreasonable for the price of paper.
I get I understand everything that they are tracking, but this platinum level plan where they do everything, there's not been a single thing that I've asked about. MFA was an extra charge. Buying more computers is an extra charge beyond just the charge for the computers. And then also I just asked about mobile device management, and that would be an extra charge. I don't want to talk about it anymore until they're in front of us, but holy moly.
It's an issue I raised in 2019 when, if you go back and look at every single budget adjustment for the last at least 7 years, the line that's always over was IT.
Mayor Pro Tem and then Councilmember Reeds.
Yeah, I think that if we are looking at this moment, our budget, then we vote for this budget, they have in the last part, equipment, repair, and replacement. It's possible that we can go to there. And Sylvia? Budget 2022, page 105.
In the budget book or in this?
In the budget that we are using at this moment. So because you will see some of the things that I would like to bring. And we adopt that budget. And at that time, when we adopt, we send a lot of papers. But now, officially, this is very, very good. And I would like that you would see that, because I think that when we are looking budget adjustments, it's something that we need to think a lot. Is there? So you can go to the website, and you can go to budget, and later you will find that and will be page?
Page 106.
106.
Yeah.
It doesn't show that there.
It's page 106 of the final adopted budget.
Budget. No, but.
She's got two screens, so she's moving.
No, it's Ruby. She's
106.
helping me.
Oh, it's starting
Look,
there, yeah.
Can you go down the first page? So, and if we can extend. So they have, for fiscal year 22, they have the different departments. So they are talking public works, facilities, PD, administration. So they say, or the numbers they are recommended, 276,000. So that was in reality then they recommended. And if that was the case for the police, was $130,000? Because this will be more emergency than the door.
So, Councilmember Carmona, one of the, this sheet is taken from something that was built and built and built in an Excel sheet that was copied and copied and copied and copied and copied. My comment to the mayor back then was, I'm not ready to recommend anything for repair and replacement because I need to get my hands on the inventory that they keep asking for. And two, what is in reality that we have and what we need? And we're just now getting to that. That's why I also asked Budget and Finance for an extra day devoted to just repair and replacement.
So watching that, you will see to the utility infrastructure reserve. So now we are adding only 74 and 55,000. Then we can discuss that later. But more about this is computer softwares. So in computers administration for fiscal year 22, they asked for 20,000. And also 10,000 more for large scanner. So this is different than the other 42 that we are looking. So this is why I think that we need to sit down, administrators, city administrator, with your heads of departments, watching this, because this is the official budget, and try to figure out what is in reality that they need and when do they need that. And a police department. So all of these, I don't know if the chief, he purchased all of that.
Well,
No.
just as a clarification, I think, and maybe this question for Sylvia or for Susanna, is that we didn't fund any repair and
No.
replacement. If you go to the summary, this is an example of some of the expenses, but when we passed our budget, there was zero money assigned to the repair and replacement fund.
Well, we transferred $102,000. Was the first transfer that they made. That is, I didn't see in any place, only when I was looking the budget. And they transferred that for repairs. And repairs has a reserve. The reserve.
It has a reserve, but we didn't budget anything for expending this year in the repair and replacement.
Right here. How much does the city expect to spend? And that was purposeful to your point about, wait, there's a scanner on there. And that sheet was built on the assumption that the scanner was going to be used more than it is, that the scanner's lifespan was only going to be this much because it was going to be used. And we have found that not only did we not use the GIS system for what it was intended, but we're not really using the plotter the way it was intended. So the lifespan of that plotter might be a little bit longer, but I get your point. What's in there is not what
Well, but I think more to your point, Mayor Pro Tem, and sorry to interrupt, but we have in our repair and replacement fund a reserve of about $650,000.
We have 567 and they put 102 more.
Correct. So we have a healthy reserve in our repair and replacement fund. That this, instead of coming out of general funds for these laptops, the money could be coming out of repair and replacement fund, which I think actually is that where it's coming out of right now?
Well, yeah.
Yeah. And then,
but first needs to come to the city council.
Right.
And the city council will discuss and we will approve. I understand exactly. Now, looking the other budgets is something that we have to discuss the utility fund. Because in the utility fund, if they are taking that money, we will finish that. And they say, well, don't worry, because it's good if that will go to general fund. And in that way, we'll have more flexibility. But if you have a fund and you were saving in one trend, and this time we don't want to save that, this will be the second or third year, no, the mayor, the other mayor, yeah, this is the second year in which we don't put for infrastructure the money that used to be. And looking that, if we're still purchasing or doing other kind of expenditures, that will go down, down, down. So I think that the idea at this moment, in the way that I am looking, we need to analyze these repairs and replacement. We need to go back and analyze. And later, if they came, the employees, they came and they have a list. This is what I say also, I don't know if in retreat. They came with one list and we analyze. And they present maybe some alternatives. We need to work with that. We need to decide if it's yes or no, because we are in the mid part of the budget. This is 6 months, then no more, no, yeah, 6 months, then we approve the budget. And it's not bad, because we can readjust if we need to move. When I tried to say the other day about earthquake or something, in reality, now we try to navigate much better and we work together. I think that is not a bad idea. The only thing is the ways or procedures, how we came to one consensus and we can decide. That's all.
Reeds?
A couple thoughts. One is, have we had discussions with like Public Works and also Budget and Finance of what our fund balance should be in things like the utility fund, looking ahead at all our CIP projects? You know, is it funded well enough? Is it insufficient? And do we expect to have those type of conversations?
We do, and we should, and I'll just use the example of our prior quote-unquote plan that was like stretched out to 40 years.
Right, I remember that plan.
In that plan was the Stearns and Countrywide multi-million-dollar projects to serve very little ROI on those projects. We went back to Austin, negotiating the water contract, and we're not going to need to spend those dollars, right? So those kinds of discussions that are embedded in those documents, there's still a lot to kind of dig out. CIP plans really at best 5 years.
Yeah.
But we do need to have a longer term projection. Yes. We do need to be planning for infrastructure. And I get his comment about the flexibility, and that was really my comment in that as we talked about restricted funds and as we talked about putting our money to work for us and as we talked about what can we do, because we're a pay-as-you-go city and the general fund is the burden bearer for the most part anyway, it's coming out of the general fund. Whether we restrict it into the utility fund and restrict ourselves further, that's a policy decision from the city. But from a financial standpoint, it would make sense that if we could put the money to work and it's earning something and we're not as restricted with it, understanding that we have a commitment to infrastructure and a capital plan, it just doesn't make sense to me to tie up things unnecessarily when we're a pay-as-you-go. That's a separate conversation.
Yeah, if we don't have a solid plan in place.
Correct.
Now, if we had a solid plan in place, knowing we had this replacement, this to do, and it would cost this amount, we would want to make sure that we are planning for that and making sure we are putting the funds toward that. So that would be something that would be great for Public Works Committee to have that discussion, Public Works Department to have that discussion, and to see, just particularly before budget time, to see is, do we need to look at this type of any decision-making with that? And I would suggest to do the same thing for repair and replacement fund. It seems to be that it's pretty overall general. I remember there was one discussion maybe 2 years ago where, do we make it very specific by every item we own, or do we make it very general where it could be used for various things? So those are all discussions that I think budget and finance should be having, and et cetera, and staff and such. So the last thought I had was that I listened in on the budget and finance meeting when they looked at these at this adjustment, and maybe Councilmember Rosengarten, since you were there, you can go through their, I know it was approved, it was voted for approval, and frankly, I don't remember any objections to anything. So if you might expand on that, if you would.
There's really nothing to expand on. It was approved as presented.
Mayor Johnson?
I think the spirit of this is just Alfonso saying, like, hey, we should talk about this. We should just talk about it. You know, even if, like, I remember when I was talking to Chief about being the liaison for public safety, and I'm just like, oh yeah, we should, you know, when there's public safety stuff, he's like, no, everything has public safety implications. Go find it. So it's just like, this is our time for, like, whenever this money stuff comes up, it's like, go find the issues. Sometimes it's okay. And maybe this is a good thing one day when we maybe start having like 5 o'clock work sessions. We could have it there instead of at 9:45. But yeah.
So to the point Councilmember Reeves made, yes, there should be a general bucket, but more than that, again, I'm going to talk about capital, and I'm going to talk about depreciation, and I'm going to talk about amortizing our buildings. We should know the lifespan of certain things and plan for those things. And we should incorporate the maintenance of those things, right? That's just the pocket of that capital. We have mixed capital and operating in this city for a long time, and the result is we suffer on the maintenance side because it's part of the operating budget. And we were tied up human resource wise, or we were tied up money resource wise because we had a different project, a different goal, a different whatever. Now that they're separated out, right, I think you deserve a much better inventory and capital asset sheet with depreciation and maintenance schedule. And I think that's going to come with what those set-asides should be to do that. I take pause when I hear the Budget and Finance did make a recommendation. They said, you need to have an IT like capital asset fund. Why don't you have that? I'm like, well, because right now it competes with air conditioners because it was kind of general to start with. We're getting better as we morph, right? As we morph as a city, as we're growing up as a city. Those are things grown-up cities, more sophisticated grown-up cities have, and we need to have that because our residents not only expect that, but we want to do things with City Hall. And, you know, there are going to be things we're going to need to just fix with City Hall that we just haven't fixed because they just waited. The dais is a perfect example. It was falling apart, and for lack of a better term, you know, these were going to be scraped because they appeared to be not fixable until, you know, we got a resident volunteer to fix them. But we shouldn't let things get to the point where they're breaking down and not doing it. And so it's more than just inventory. It's taking a good look at our capital.
Councilor Litchfield?
Yeah, thank you. I totally agree with that, Sylvia. The other question I would love to just revisit briefly is, it doesn't quite feel right to have to transfer in from reserves, like this $3,000, whereas when we budget, we don't transfer from reserves, we just budget against future revenue. So maybe this is just like an intricacy of budget that's goofy feeling to me, but is that like strictly necessary, or can we pull that from future revenue?
It's strictly necessary. You budget to a revenue here. The revenue projection is the revenue projection is the revenue projection. Anything above that is expected to fall to fund balance, and then we have a separate set of books monitoring the fund balance, which is why you saw that summary sheet. But in the normal course of events, if we were later on in the year, I could say, oh, we had salary savings of X because we didn't fill Carolyn's position until Y. Our policy says there was no budget line item that created a contract, there was nothing in that adopted budget. So you have to do a budget amendment anyway to first put something in to be able to take the expense out. And then we're kind of early in the year. Carolyn just extended an offer to that person. I know we're probably gonna have some funds left, but at the end it's a sweep because we'll end up sweeping that back to the reserve.
We budget a slight surplus too, don't we?
Sorry, I wanted to add one more thing onto what she was saying too. Another item is our utility fund is all of the money that isn't generated in revenue comes from general fund, and that subsidized amount is already set, so we'd have to change the amount of the subsidy in order to not go negative in the fund. So we would also have to do another budget adjustment to take it from something else.
Councilor Reeds.
So I moved that to approve this budget amendment.
So there's a motion to approve the budget amendment, which includes all the items, right?
All of the items, yes.
All right.
It's 10 to 10.
Is there a second for that motion?
I'll second it.
It's a second. That reopens it or opens it up for more discussion. So, Mayor Person,
Well,
I think your mic's off.
yeah, looking the numbers, can we see that for agenda 14? No, that numbers. So the numbers down, if you will go with they attach memo, they say memo budget adjustment number 6. So at the end, okay. So, okay. No, can you go down, please? Boom, more. I got it. Okay. Well, in my copies, I saw the big total in one side and the other request in the other side, so the numbers, they didn't match. So when I was looking, some numbers in this side and some numbers on this side, and it say big total, grand total. I say, no, that grand total is only, I say 30,000, and now I can see that it's not 30,000. But in the way that they were doing, in this case, they are asking for 3 computers in the administration, plus one for 5 computers. So all the administration will have a new computer, looks like. And later, in the police, only 3 persons, they will have a computer. That is right, Chief?
No, we're at the PD, we were kind of going from computers to laptops. So there are 3 computers that will go to the PD, but they're not going to, there's only one going to Shanna, then one is going to the room where we get our records if we run somebody and dispatch sends us records. Those 5 tough books, from now on, the PD is going to use those as computers. We're not going to have computers and laptops. We'll just use our laptops as computers. So that's going to reduce the number of computers that we have instead of buying both.
Yes. I try to ask you because maybe at this moment it's a good time where you can be checking this proposal for your department.
Yeah,
And
this
if
came
you
from my department.
I'm sorry?
This proposal came from my
Well,
department, yeah.
So if you support that, I agree, but when I was looking here, they say Panasonic laptops will be the chief, will be the Sergeant Stern, and Sergeant Gills. 3 laptops. And later with Shanna will be only 1 computer. So the other officers, nobody use computers. The sergeants, they don't use computers?
They're going to use their laptops. That's, the laptops, we're going to connect them to a monitor. Instead of buying another computer, we're gonna get a monitor and then attach it to the laptop.
And the patrol officers?
Laptops. Right now,
No, but
patrol
only
officers.
you have 2.
Well, we already have some laptops that were approved in 2021. They're still new.
So maybe it will be a good idea as we are talking about the inventory, and in that way, which of them they are in the 21 and who has that computers. And now if we approve in 22, who will have that computers? And in that way, we cover that. That is very, very important. And perhaps in the same way with public works, I don't see any computer for public works. Only we'll have Rolando. Public works is Rolando.
I'm sorry.
I'm sorry?
Mayor, can I call to question? And the base of interest, we have 3 minutes left, and I know we can't vote after 10.
All right, so
I'm
there's a
sorry to interrupt.
No, thank you for.
There's a motion to call to question, which we have to have a second on, and then we vote on the call to question. So is there a second?
Second.
All right. All those in favor of calling the question, which is not to say you're approving the amendment, it's just to whether we move to, I enjoy saying that, but all those in favor of calling the question, which is to proceed to a vote on the amendment, say aye.
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 All opposed, say nay. All right, so now we're going to take.
Nay.
Okay, so that the motion is now before us, and that's to approve the budget amendment, number 6. All those in favor of approving budget amendment number 6, say aye.
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 All opposed, say nay.
Nay.
All right, the motion approved, and with that, we are out of agenda items, council, and we could take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
All right, is there a second?
Second.
All right, all those in favor of adjourning, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say nay. All right, we are adjourned at 9:58 p.m.